order? Okay. Okay, great. First off on the agenda, any public comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to our approval of the minutes of
Well, a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, second.
I just need names when you're making approval.
Okay, who is that for second?
Even roll.
Okay, Carlton made the motion. I didn't catch who seconded it.
Thank you.
Steve.
I didn't have
Steve,
any.
you're real faint. For your volume, I don't know. I don't know why. Okay, roll call to approve the minutes. Josh?
Yep. Gina,
Okay. Yep. Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Carlton,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Harry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, the financial update that Josh sent out. It was sent out yesterday afternoon, 30th. I'm just jumping back to that one. Okay. Not too much has changed from last month.
Gina, I had a couple of questions.
Obviously, revenues are down for the tax money. Sure, go right ahead. I'm actually just opening mine right now, but shoot.
For municipal financing, I'm assuming that the black positive numbers are in excess of the budget. Is that correct? Michael or someone?
Let me pull up the
Rob.
report.
Could you repeat the question? I didn't hear that.
Let me give you an example. It says real estate surcharge, projected budget 593 and 880, and 2020 actual is 669, and that number is larger than the budgeted number, and so it's in black and positive. I'm assuming that means it's an excess.
Correct, I think.
Yeah, that's an excess. And the reason why it's the 593 number is what was in the original budget, and that was then allocated as part of the budget of last year. And then the actual was higher, and that is why the available amount is only the 75,000, because that was unaccounted for in the budget.
Thank you. That's all great that all those things are positive numbers. I had one question. The 2020 actual was through the end of, what is this, May or June, April?
The report that was sent out yesterday is through April 30th.
Okay, all right. So we have April and then May and June left. Do we anticipate more coming in from the real estate surcharge, or is that pretty much everybody's gotten their taxes in?
I obviously there's always money dribbling in. You'll see on one of the spreadsheets it says like 2019 taxes. That's people that have paid late. So there's always going to be dribs and drabs coming in. I'm not sure. Possibly Michael can answer if the majority of people have paid their taxes by May 1st, or if there's still a lot outstanding.
There are some sizable ones outstanding. As you know, we changed the due date from May 1st to June 1st. So we do have, I learned today that we have some of the larger taxpayers have used that to their advantage, obviously, but we expect payment. But the good news is that we're expecting 98 to 99% collection rate for FY20, which is good.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you.
Right. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah.
I have another question on the balance sheet. Again, it's my inexperience with this accounting system. I'm learning. Underneath liability, there is an item 261000 deferred revenue property CPA, and it's showing negative, and I'm not sure what that means.
Okay, which sheet are you on?
I'm on the balance sheet, 5/26/2020 balance sheet. Asset total, asset total, and then underneath that's liability.
Oh, okay, I see it.
And there's two negative numbers there. That means that we're negative. And I just wanted to know why it was there and as negative.
So that I believe that the one you're looking at, Carlton, is the deferred tax liens. So when we place liens on taxes, when the money eventually comes in, it gets allocated to obviously general fund, and then the portion that's attributable to the CPA goes, or CPC goes into the CPC. So that's what that deferred tax lien CPA line item is. That's just liens that the portion of the liens that the CPA portion of the liens that we've placed on property.
Okay, and so if those get paid, then that number goes down. If we don't get paid, it stays negative or whatever.
Stays, or actually could increase depending on interest accruals.
Okay, thank you. I think I have one more question on the expense to actual sheet. I understand. The main question is that we expect some expenditures on admin yet still. Is that correct for this fiscal year?
Correct.
Okay. And the last question is on the last item, 596110, transfer to capital project. Is that for the ball field fencing, for the Legion Field ball field fencing?
Where is that, Carlton?
Are you on the same sheet?
Look at the expense budget to actual. Last thing, right before the words grand total, it's transferred to capital project. And I'm assuming that's for the ball field.
Yep, that's the amount. I would guess, because that's the amount that we approved was the 27,000.
Oh, good point. Yeah, it's just on this at this level. I just wanted to make sure that's what it was for.
Mm-hmm.
It's money that's been appropriated or whatever.
Yeah.
I may have a dated copy of the report. So on mine, it's not appearing, but if that was voted, but the account had not been set up yet, then Lori probably would have added in that line just to try to give you as accurate a sheet as possible.
Yeah, our thing is dated 5/6/2020.
Actually, I'm looking at the date on it, and it does say 5/26. So she gave it year to date. It wasn't. I had thought she could get just to April, but this is even better because it's a year to date report. So that's good. So I correct myself. I had said it was April 30th. It's really May 26th.
So last point is, so while we show a fund balance total of 4,016,000, $4,016,000 as a total. When we take out the appropriations and the reserves for the continuing appropriations, et cetera, we have available dollars. I calculated about a little over $2 million that are available to us in our bank account. Just I don't know how many public are here, but that's just so people know, because I do see a couple of people I don't recognize, and some other smiling faces just joined us. So that was my piece on the financial report. I think it's good. We've got substantial money available to us for projects down the road.
Right. Yep, Laurie's good sending, and she's right on the ball on top of these things, putting things in, so that's good. Do we need our motion to accept that, or we just review it? We usually just review it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any motion needed for that.
Okay, I didn't think so.
We're
Okay,
not voting on anything or et cetera, but so that's FYI.
right, okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions on these financial reports? Okay, moving on to the FY21 budget discussion and vote. We had talked about this budget before, but we never put it to a final vote, which is what we need to do now tonight.
So I have a question. This is a process issue. I went through and looked at the IRG 19-14, and this was put before the town council before we had made our vote and appropriation. And from a process perspective, that's incorrect according to DOER. So I think that's poor practice. But I have done some calculations, and I look at the sheet that was sent out, and reserves for the community preservation and open space and historic resources is supposed to be 10%. For some reason, it's 13.75%. And I recalculated it based on the 10% requirement, and it doesn't say you can't go higher that I know of, but I don't know if we have anybody here can tell us why it was put in higher than what the 10% is. Okay, hearing none.
Okay, I thought we had talked about just putting the actual 10% in when we had talked about it before. And I can't remember if it was Michael or I remember talking about it at a previous meeting. Just saying what would be putting in, might have been with Anna that we were discussing it too. And I thought we had said the 10%.
So Anna can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the 10% is the estimate of your total revenues, your tax, your property tax revenues, plus your anticipated state aid. So I think when that calculation was done, Tony and Laura used the 10% of the anticipated revenues. And I know that there was some feeling, and I honestly can't remember, but I gathered that there was some feeling that we should increase the revenues, budgeted revenues, which you know, I don't think they did it above the 10%, but I think there was a little bit of question about whether or not we could estimate higher revenues on the state aid side. So I think we tried to stick to a conservative figure. So so I'm going to, you know, I have not heard any indication that that's something other than the 10% of that estimate.
Thank you, Michael. But if you look at the numbers in that sheet, which I don't know if you have before you, CPA surcharge 2% is 630, state match 110,000, interest income 7,000 for a total estimated revenue of $747,000. So clearly $102,000 in the sheet that we received is not 10%. The actual percent number would be 74,700.
So, but Carlton, are you looking at the 2020 actuals?
I'm looking at the FY 2021 recommended budget that came from your office.
Right.
And those numbers don't match.
But what revenues are you looking at?
747,000.
Oh, on the actual,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't have it
I'm
in front of
looking
me.
at the recommended budget and it says the minimum is 10% and the supply is 13.75%. And that's why it's 102.
Why is it 102?
Because they're putting 13.75% instead of 10% into each of their reserves.
And that's what I'm disagreeing with.
Right. But I don't know why they've decided to do that. I think that's,
So I'm going to offer a motion here in a moment, but the motion is going to do the following. Community Housing Reserve, 10%, 74700. Open Space Reserve, $74,700. Same for historic resources. And I'm suggesting we add a line that is for reserves. It's either goes to the fund balance, number 35,9,000, or to the designated special purposes, line item 358,000. Because we need to specify that, and that amount of money is $83,940. That simply cleans up that 10% question and moves money into the special reserve. It's a simple mathematical calculation.
Okay, so I apologize, I jumped up, I just printed this out, so I can put notes on it. You're proposing to move community housing, open space, and historical resources back to the 10%.
Correct. And then that doesn't balance that number, and we would add and send money to the fund balance, either the fund balance or the designated special purposes. I'm not sure what the difference is, if it has anything to do with accessing money more quickly or what. So I just need to know which one we should send it to.
Go into the undesignated. The special purposes fund is a fund that's defunct, basically. They was created a long time ago, and it's basically serving as the undesignated fund. So if you're moving money, it should be voted into the undesignated fund, not the special purpose fund.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So what I would like to do, and so we can continue discussion, I would move, and Josh, if you want to put that up, I drafted these motions because I didn't think we would waste time chatting about the specific language. So I'm going to move it so we can talk about it. I move that the town council vote to appropriate or reserve from the Community Preservation Fund annual revenues for available funds, the amounts recommended by the Community Preservation Committee for committee administrative expenses, debt service, community preservation projects, and other expenses in fiscal year 2021, with each item to be considered a separate appropriation. The table would be modified. Nothing gets changed in the revenue estimate. The reserve estimates are as we've discussed, and the fund balance would be where it would go to, would increase by $83,940. I've done this checks on the spreadsheet, and that all balances out correctly. So that's my motion.
Okay, Josh, do you have that you can put up on the screen?
Yes, give me just one minute.
Okay, thanks.
I have some issues with the camera, so.
Okay, we can take a look at it and entertain a second so we can discuss it. Or entertain us. Yeah, we'll look at it first and then we'll.
You need a second at some point.
Right.
All right, I think it should be popping up on the screen in just a second here.
Okay. Do we have a second for that to discuss it? To move into discussion on it?
That's the wrong one. Just while he's finding it, I decided that I would submit to the chair and to Josh written motions to help us move forward more quickly and actually see what the motion is on the screen. So.
Right, and that's good because especially this one with the money, we can actually see it. Okay, well, Josh is doing that. Do we have a second for discussion? Hello?
I'll second. Steve
Okay,
wrote it.
is that Steve?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. So Carlton, while Josh is getting that up, you want the revenue, like each section on this this chart you want voted as a separate?
No. We're telling the town council in that motion that each item is considered a separate appropriation. This actually comes from the guidance provided by DOR.
Okay.
Can everybody see?
Yep,
Okay,
we got
can you
it.
scroll it down just a hair and make it, well, I guess you can make it bigger.
Yeah, you can make it bigger.
Tell me where the motion is.
Motion is right there where you've got it on the screen.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
the up above language is a little bit more explanatory purpose. They recommended that in the DO, in their 19-14 recommendations and guidance suggested that we provide purpose and intent so the town council understands more appropriately. It's important because the town council, not all of them have gone through this before, so I think that's a really important element to continue, but that's just the purpose. The motion again, I move that the town council vote to appropriate or reserve from Community Preservation Fund annual revenues or available funds the amounts recommended by the Community Preservation Committee for committee administrative expenses, debt service, community preservation projects, and other expenses in the fiscal year 2021, with each item to be considered a separate appropriation. Part of that motion is the table that I've modified, and the modified table is in green.
Okay, I don't see green.
He needs to scroll it down a little bit.
Okay,
I know we're putting you to the test, Josh. There we go.
No, it's a,
There you go. So what I've changed is the community preservation housing to 10%, as we discussed, and then made sure the balance was balanced out by undesignated reserves being 83,940.
okay. Michael, do you know why they increased it to 13.75?
I am just trying to find out now. There's no reason we would have done that without direction from presumably CPC, but so I'm trying to find out what the rationale is there.
I know
Well,
we had talked about like the estimated state match, like drastically increasing that. I don't recall increasing. I thought we were still doing the 10%.
Yeah,
Anna, do you remember?
No, but I know, looking back at the budget from last year, that's also how they balanced it. They did 13.75.
well,
Okay.
So
I think we need to correct that.
But it wouldn't have, I mean, it wouldn't have made a difference because it's, I mean, the numbers are largely fungible.
I don't know anyone.
If we, if we made it 10% above the line, you just adjust below the line. So I'm very confused why it is that way.
If we adjust it to what I'm proposing, then you have an excess of 83,940 that's not appropriated to anything, unless you change the income up above. So all I'm doing is doing the bookkeeping.
Right, but no, that's fine. I don't see any problem with that. I'm very curious why that was changed, because you're voting the expenses. If you don't, if you lower the expenses, it just goes back into your larger pool of money. So I just don't know the reason for that.
Well, what I need to understand is the reason why 13.75% were proposed without approval.
No, I agree.
Right. We have to look back, because as I said, I was under the assumption all these years it was 10%, but as Anna said, if it was 13.75 last year, why was it the year before? When was it actually changed? This could have been for years. And we just never figured that there wasn't the 10%. Never noticed it.
Let's focus on this year, and if
Right.
everybody approves of this, then we will have to send a memo to the town council and the FinCom that the numbers need to be adjusted for their voting. And they're doing it next week, I assume.
Okay, so that,
or the 23rd or whatever that June date is.
Okay, so they don't meet. They met last week. Okay. Okay, so basically, let me do a screenshot of that so I have it. I like the Zoom meetings that I can just screenshot things that I want. Okay, any other discussion on that? Reducing it to, Carlton's motion to reduce it to the 10% and take the difference, which is between the 10% and the 13.75, which is 83,940, and putting it into undesignated reserves. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. Okay, Anna, first, do you have any input on that, suggestions or?
Motion.
The motion?
Right,
I think it's fine. I don't think there's any issue with it.
Okay. Okay, we'll do our roll call vote on Carlton's motion.
Okay, Gina,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Carl, oh, wrong one.
Yep, that was Steve.
Yeah,
Yes. I guess.
Steve,
Steve, yes.
Carlton,
Yes.
Harry,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, so Michael, do you want me to write something up to the town council through you that we voted to change it?
Well, I know Josh has absolutely nothing to do, so he could probably just forward that to me, and I'll include that in the budget packet, or the budget for the CPC.
Okay,
Or-
Josh
Michael,
will
not to
then
be-
earns his money.
Michael, not to be too pushy, but next year, this won't happen next year, so that it goes before the council before we vote, right?
No, I know this has happened once before. This year, obviously a little, lot unique. So no,
Yes.
we're gonna try to get this. And honestly, now that the committee is somewhat stabilized, there's nothing wrong with, beginning of the budget discussion. It's not a complex budget, obviously, and we try to build in all the flexibility in the world for the committee. But yeah, you could start having conversations about it in February, January, and we could just make sure it's, as a routine, gets through a little quicker.
Yeah, I just want to be clean in terms,
Okay.
in case somebody comes back at us.
Yep, we're really trying to be organized, Michael. We're getting there.
It's noticeable.
Okay, good, thank you. What was that?
I said it's noticeable.
Did you say it's not possible? Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, we try. Okay, I know we have people on here from the Congregational Church, and we also have Attorney Rollins on for that.
Motion to
Could we
take.
have a motion to maybe to take out of order?
Motion.
Okay,
You need a
I'll
second?
motion to take out of order, second.
Jean will second.
Okay, Gina,
Okay, roll call,
yep, Gina,
yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Carlton,
Yay.
Harry,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, everybody should be in receipt of Attorney Rollins' opinion on the church, and I thank the folks from the church for being patient through this, and for coming to, well, virtually coming to our meeting. I actually like these virtual meetings. Okay, you've had a chance to read it. Questions, comments from the committee, okay, the church folks haven't seen the written, and we can send that, distribute that to you. Okay, questions from the committee on Attorney Rollins' opinions? Hello?
Well, I guess
Did I get?
is there anything church application that would be covered? I mean, it is a downtown center that is used by a lot of people in town. So is there anything?
You asking me, Gene?
Yes, Jason. Is
Okay.
there anything at all?
Sure. So it unfortunately is not that clean of a question. It's hard. And the anti-aid amendment, as you can see in my memo, is not uncomplicated within itself, right? So there's
Right.
no per se constitutional rule against some type of funding, public funding, for a church or a religious institution. The factors, though, you have to use to analyze whether that funding is in violation of the anti-amendment clause of our Constitution are very specific. So it really would be almost impossible to tell you what they could or couldn't fund. We could go through that exercise. I saw their breakdown of costs and items. I mean, that memorandum would take, a small novel, probably 1,000 pages of analysis, right? Because each individual thing has to be analyzed. In the case that I had given you guys, it was only really referencing stained glass windows, so it was a little cleaner. But the court was very clear on that one, that they did find it to be in violation of the anti-aid amendment. So there is not, and I wouldn't even want to venture a guess what conceivable thing would not violate the anti-amendment clause. There may be one, there may not be one, but I think you have to analyze what you have before you, which you have to go through those step-by-step analysis of the specifics of the application. Of course, I wasn't involved in any of that process, so I can only glean from what I have in front of me in the written materials. But that's the analysis. I do think the Kaplan case is on point. I think it is analogous in a lot of ways to what we have here. In fact, what was being asked in the Kaplan case in terms of funding amount, which is a relevant factor under our analysis, I believe part 2, section 2, is the dollar figures, right? I think here they're asking for $1.5 million. There they were asking for 51,000. So there are discernible distinctions that I don't think work in the favor of it not being prohibited under the anti-aid amendment. So there is no bright line rule that says no, you cannot fund churches, but the specifics of the case have to be thread so neatly that they have to work under each one of those parts of the test that I gave you. If they don't work under those parts of the test, then they fail and they're a violation of the anti-amendment. And I would say that in the case of Kaplan versus the town of Acton, which is a 2017 case decided by our state's highest court, our state Supreme Court, essentially, they were very careful about how they analyzed it, and painstakingly so, which is why my memo, believe it or not, might feel painstaking, but it is boiled down from about a 60-page analysis. So it is very specific as to what needs to be analyzed.
Okay.
There was a case a few years ago that I remember hearing of a playground at a church that went to the federal Supreme Court.
It
was allowed because it was a community access to?
Well, there again, so that may be, I don't know, of course I haven't looked that case up. I don't know every single case that's ever existed.
Yeah, I know.
There are trillions. So I certainly can analyze that case. But the analysis, regardless, at this stage, at this time in our government, is the analysis I provided you. So it doesn't really matter precedentially unless it's something that's on point to what our case is that you have before you. I think you have to still do this factual analysis. There's no bright line rule that, yeah, a playground next to it is okay, but this stained glass windows aren't okay. I don't think the court envisions the analysis to go that way. I don't think this is like, okay, these things are okay and these things aren't. I think it's so fact specific and fact driven that you literally have to go through each part of the test that I provided you, and you have to answer each one in a certain way. Otherwise, it's a violation of the anti-aid amendment. So I think the thing that a lot of these projects run into, the biggest problem under the current law is whether the effect of the funding is to substantially aid the church, right? And so that's part 3, section 2 of the 3-factor test. And there are so many easy ways for a court to interpret that absolutely it aids the church, because essentially if you fix these things, the church's funds don't have to go towards those things, which allow the church to focus on its efforts of bringing people in, doing religious activities, which are all great, right? But when you do that, right, the other side of this, in accordance with what the Supreme Court is trying to say and our state Supreme Court is trying to say, is that by doing that, you're indirectly discriminating against other denominations and other people and other religious buildings and other. So there is this, the reason they're so specific and painstaking in this is not to hurt churches, but to be very careful about everyone being treated equally. And so that really is the intent. And that really is the intent of the Constitution. It's not that the state constitution or the federal constitution don't want to help churches or don't want to help people, but this anti-aid amendment derived out of our constitutional convention in Massachusetts, where there was a lot of upheaval over different religions, and in particular different and this is getting into the history of it, but different factions of Christianity and who would be favored over who. And if your tax dollars are going to one denomination, but not the church you go to. And that is where this all kind of comes from. So obviously everyone wants to see beautification of these buildings. No one denies that, but you have to really, you have to put the thread through the needle on these if you're going to make it work. And you have to go through each part of this analysis, and it has to be spot on. Otherwise, it's a violation of the Constitution.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Jason, can I just ask that, obviously, we have to look at, the CPC has to look at every line item one by one. But can I ask you that once we do that we pass our analysis through you?
Yeah, that's
I know
fine.
you're busy, and it's a busy time with this whole virus pandemic, but
Sure.
if we could do that, I'd feel a lot more comfortable getting a legal opinion.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
So
great.
so your analysis though should be based on the information that you've gathered and heard, right? So I shouldn't be the fact finder. You all have heard these things, you all have seen the presentation and studied the material. So in that way, you should be the fact finder, and you should take the analysis I provided you with those facts that you found and heard and have written, and look to see, just match them up, right? Where does this go in the pot? Where does this go in the pot? How does this fit here? And that's how your analysis should really run. I know it's painstaking and it can be really annoying. I do it for a living and it can be painstaking. So I understand the exercise is not, I enjoy doing it, but it's not everyone's dream come true. And in particular, in this case, it's really important because this does present, honestly, constitutional issues. It's bigger than just yes or no, right? There are constitutional issues that are implicated here.
Right. An example, we had talked about with the church folks was the steeple. You know, is a steeple religious? Is it historical? And what I just saw very recently is that steeples were basically towers, and they were a common element of religious architecture, in an attempt to reach skywards towards the heavens. So, and the divine. So,
Well, that's
you
if
know,
you
you
believe.
get-
I guess that's if you believe in heaven, but
well, that's true. That's true.
which again prompts the discrimination issue. But because there are atheists in the world, there are people that believe in some different form of
True.
religion.
True. That's true.
And that's why the analysis I gave you really has nothing to do with that.
Right.
The analysis has to do with, is the primary purpose of the funding to aid this particular church rather than the proper purpose of historic preservation, right? So that one, you got to do a factual analysis. The second
Right.
one, whether the effect of the funding is to substantially aid the church. That usually is one where you're gonna run into problems, right? Because that is pretty easy to say, something is intended to aid the church, right? The only circumstance where that makes sense under the case law is the Massachusetts State Supreme Court basically said that a grant of public funds does not violate the Anti-Aid Amendment if the assistance it provides to a private institution, or here a church, is merely minimal or remote, right? So that's what you have to look at, right? Is paying $100,000 to redo a steeple minimal or remote? I don't know, right? That'd be a tough one to argue in court. In particular with the context of the stained glass case that we already have, right? And then you have the other part, whether the funding avoids the risks that prompted the passage of the Anti-Aid Amendment. Now this goes back to the 1800s. So this goes to why this was enacted to begin with, which I've kind of touched on. And it basically is this notion that the government should not entangle itself or be at all involved in this country in religion, right? There should be a separation of church and state. And so it says, factor one of that, the risk that the liberty of conscience would be infringed whenever a citizen was taxed to support the religious institutions of others. So this was very common back then, but I think it's common today. You have a diversity of views. You have a diversity of religions. If you're being taxed on your tax bill and you are building churches of other religions, that's a little bit entangling, right? And so there is no specific no prohibition on doing this, but it is a very, very fine. You got to put that thread right through, right, the hole to make this work. And I can't think of many circumstances where you're doing the work on the church itself, where you're not going to answer some of these questions, saying, well, yeah, that is happening, right? And that's not against any religion or denomination or anything. It's just the analysis we have to use.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions, discussion?
I got my hand up, Gina,
Okay.
but I don't
Okay.
speak until other people have. Okay. Jason, thank you for your email. You've added a few things that we weren't totally aware of, and I appreciate that, and I think you should be nominated for the next Supreme Court.
Yeah. Thanks.
With the state, Jason.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing,
I'll vote for you. You want to be the president?
what I'm hearing is that you're saying you're not giving us a definitive no.
Right.
Therefore, you're saying proceed, but with caution, and do a detailed analysis of the activities that you just talked about. Am I correct in that? And that's your legal opinion.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So what I'm saying is there's no, you can't just say no, right? Because that within itself has a prohibitive and discriminatory connotation.
Right.
But the analysis that this court has done and our state's highest court have done are very specific to the point where if any of these things fail, right? And I'm not telling, it's not a reach to get there, right? You can look at a lot of these things and say, yeah, clearly this doesn't work in this context, right? Then it would violate the Constitution of our state, right? And that is what the court said in the Acton case. And I will tell you, they defended that, the town of Acton defended that vigorously, and there were a lot of amicus briefs, and it was really very contentious, but the court basically said, nah, this doesn't pass this because it stands against everything we tried to do with the 58th Amendment. And that had to do with stained glass windows. This is a little different contextually. And I think you use your own judgment on it, but I think there are so many specific things that have to be met, so many specific conditions and considerations the applicant has to meet to make this work, that it is very difficult. And I will say that.
Yep, understood. Understood. To the point, two things before I think I'm going to make do a motion. You have not said that we can't do it, but you've said do more work. And so my point is simply, my question is can you, through the town manager, help us say, let's say I propose a subcommittee to really study this and get the pros and cons and a table together, to say what you can and can't do, et cetera, and how they meet all that. Are you willing to help us with getting that thinking process going?
I am, but I want to be careful about that. So this is what I would say to that. So I believe, right, again, and this goes back to everyone being treated evenly. So I believe it's up to the applicant to submit an application to you all that they believe fits within this criteria and justify why, right? I don't believe nor do I believe the town should engage in this, up to the town to look at what could be done, right? That's a private enterprise, again, that the town shouldn't engage in. The town has the duty to make fair legal decisions for people based on what they apply for, and really should not be going outside of that. So that's what I would say. I would say that I like the idea. I think it's reasonable. I don't think it's maybe what we should be engaging in. I think if the applicant wants to withdraw their application and look at these cases and go back and try to find a way to thread that needle and come back with something, then that's okay. That's their prerogative. But I don't think the town should be engaged in telling them what that is, because we don't know. And honestly, we're not going to formulate an answer other than a yes or no based on how we analyze what they tell us, right? And we want to be careful about that.
Thank you. Very, very, very good information. Second, the Supreme Court recommendation.
Yeah, right.
So basically, you're suggesting that we pass on the even, like there's 3 steps to even your opinion, and ask the church folks to, like, just, even if they wanted to use the same application, just amend it to show each, like the siding or the steeple and how they think it fits into these 3 points?
Well, I mean, certainly you can give an applicant that opportunity. That's completely on you guys. I certainly don't want to tell you what to do. You guys are in charge of this. So you can give applicants that opportunity. Whether or not that will carry the day or be persuasive under what the legal analysis should be will be up to you guys, right? And so if it's something you can already decide, I think it's almost unfair to prolong the process and have the applicant incur additional time and expense that they don't need to if the analysis is going to be the same regardless. If the applicant wants to withdraw an application and rework their theory or the wheel or what they're doing or based on what the case law is, sure. I mean, be open to applicants, be accepting of, you know, obviously what they, don't be draconian about it, but, you know, I think it's, if the ultimate decision can be analyzed, regardless of who is going to make what pitch, you can save that for court. You know, you're going to make your decision, and that'll be that, right? Unless there is something the applicant, you know, proposes that you all are willing to consider under some context.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks for the clarification. I thought your other suggestion had been what I said, but thanks for clarifying that.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, great. Any other discussion?
I think the applicants are on the online here. I think they've heard the discussion. I've heard Attorney Rollins' notations loud and clear, and I think we have to leave it up to them as to how they want to proceed. What we heard is we're not saying no, but what would be saying by asking them to follow a slightly different path, or suggesting that they follow a different path, is that they come back to us with high specificity as to what they think, and their attorneys and their historic preservation person would actually think that could pass this test. That's what I think I'm hearing.
I don't think that's a bad idea.
So I think it's up to the applicants at this point, and I don't know, you know, we don't have to have an answer tonight, but I think they need to have time to go back and consider all of the notes here. And I'm assuming we're recording this meeting.
It is recorded. Yep.
Yeah. So if you need some, if you can't keep enough notes, or the notes got, like mine, are scattered all over the place, certainly we can, that's just a public meeting, and you can refer to that for your comments.
Okay. Barbara or Harry, Gordon, I'm not sure who else from the church is on here. Do you have any comments or thoughts or after hearing the discussion?
Well, there's a lot to think about.
Right.
And yeah, I guess I'm still, there's a lot of information that was given to us by Attorney Rollins. And so I would like a little bit more clarification on how you want us to amend our application. A few steps that I could write down and then proceed that way with my committee.
My thought is, and others on the committee can add to it or correct me if they think differently, is to look at what you have, what you've submitted, and you've given us the breakdown of, you know, all the parts with the costs. And maybe I'd have to look back at your application, but if you haven't put the significance that it's, I know for some things you did say the historical, do you have the 3 steps, the 3 things to look at?
I have a copy of the entire application.
Right, but the three steps to look at to
Gina, let's just send the Jason Rollins memo to them so they have it in entirety and specificity.
Right,
Okay.
it's a 3-factor test that you look at. So
Okay.
I can forward you that tonight.
It's very well stated, and with a little case law and stuff. But as you heard Attorney Rollins said, there's a lot of fine. Well, I'd say it's like an almost closed needle. So be careful.
Right. So my thought is, if you look at that and look back at your application and see, like, the different parts, if it passes that 3-step test. Sorry if my hands are going in the picture. That's the Italian in me. But the hands go. I just looked at them. All I'm seeing is a blur of hands. But Barbara, if you can look, you and your folks look at your application, look at Jason's opinion. He's, as Carlton said, everything is really well said in it. And he really spells out that 3-point test. So if you can look and see, try to provide more backup to us if the different segments of your application, like backup that you feel that could pass that 3-point test. Or if you
Okay.
feel it wouldn't pass the 3-point test. CPC members agree with that or add, change, anything?
Yes, that's about the best way to go.
Okay,
I agree.
thanks.
Could I make just a comment as a church member?
Sure. Are you Gordon?
Yes, I'm Gordon.
Hi, Gordon.
I'm one of the treasurers in the church,
Okay.
trustees in the church. And what was said, it appears as though we're in a no-win situation, that no matter what money that's spent on the church, if the town does it and we don't do it, obviously that's money that would be available to the church if we were going to repair it, and would be available for other things, and which brings us into a conflict with other churches. So it seems like a pretty hard obstacle to get over. So that's how I see it. So it seems to me it's like a no-win situation right from the beginning.
I wouldn't say it's a no-win. It's just that fine line between church and state. And we just have to make sure that we're not opening us up to a court case like the town of Acton. That they were brought to court and it went to the Supreme Court. We're just trying to make sure that every T is crossed, I is dotted. We can provide backup. If another church or a townsperson comes and says, well, you shouldn't have spent money for that because that's has a religious connotation to it. We just want to make sure that we're following the law to a T. So I wouldn't say it's a no-win. We're not saying right now, no, that we're not recommending any money for it. We're just saying we need more information and to make sure that it fits this 3-point test. Okay, other comments, discussion? Oh,
I'd like to move back to the active projects update.
okay, moving. Okay, we're done with the church. Jason, I want to thank you so much for all your help.
My pleasure. You guys need me for anything else, or am I good?
No, in the morning.
Yeah, unless you want to stick around for the memorial building.
Unless you need me, I want to go eat dinner.
Hey, I haven't eaten dinner yet either. I'm having my Diet Coke right now. I didn't think it would be good
They're
to choke
cooking
on.
it outside.
I'm starving.
I know, that's right. I had a Zoom meeting yesterday. I sat outside for it, but I thought I couldn't write at the same time and sit outside.
Moving on, moving on.
Okay, Jason, thank you again so much. And
Thank
we'll
you.
be
Have a
in
good
touch
one.
if we need to be.
Jason.
Great,
Take it
thank
easy.
you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Okay.
So I'm going to go to the Old Bridgewater Historic Society. Very-
Okay, is that jumping over the manager's request for the $550,000 for the memorial building?
No, it's going back to the project, to our agenda.
Right, but we haven't hit that yet. We
I'm
did the
going to
budget.
the next agenda item is active projects update.
Okay, what I'm looking at, it says manager's request for capital $550,000 on the agenda.
I don't see that on our agenda.
Okay. Josh, do I have the amended, or not amended?
Just double checking.
It says applications update, Old Central Square Church and Memorial Building.
No, I believe the amended agenda had manager's request. So let me-
Yeah. There's an amended agenda that was sent out. I think it was actually the same day, shortly after.
Well, I still want to go back to the reports.
Okay, so you want to take it out of order?
Yeah, we'll need a motion to do that.
Just, I'm confused. Just go ahead and go straight forward. I apparently have the wrong agenda.
Yeah,
Okay.
The amended agenda has the manager's report.
Okay.
And-
Okay, I guess I'm confused myself. What's the difference between application update for Memorial Building and the manager's request? They're the same thing, correct?
The manager's request was, I was asked to add that.
Okay,
to the
and
vote.
that kind of goes along with, okay,
You
the
go
Memorial
ahead.
Building.
Gina, go, that's, you can go in the order that you originally had. That's certainly fine.
Okay. Okay, so we'll put that whole thing with the Memorial Building discussion. Okay, moving on to active project updates. Old Bridgewater Historical, Carlton.
Yes, we have received an invoice for about 92% of the remaining activity, which was to assess the condition of 2 buildings. The invoice was almost 95% of the budget, and the Old Bridgewater Historic Society did not like the complete report and actually had requested that they re-invoice us for 75%. I have as of yesterday and this morning, asked the chair of the Old Bridgewater Historic Society to submit the invoice as submitted to us to the town for payment of the $20,000, because I want to get this cleaned up before the end of the fiscal year. I don't know if she and the executive board will in fact do that, but I just want people to know that I've seen the report, I've reviewed the report. The 20,000 should be paid to them, and I think it's, in this time of COVID, it's not appropriate, and I will tell this to the whole Bridgewater Historic Society, which I'm a member of. I will tell them that it's inappropriate to hold up money for somebody that's spent a year doing work for us. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Okay. Any questions on the Historical Society Carlton's report? Okay. Legion Field fencing. I talked to Charlie Simons the other day. It's just about done. There's one portion that still needs to be done. Then he'll be submitting the bills for that. And that will be cleared up, finished up.
Will he be submitting a report to us
Okay.
detailing her requirements?
I can ask him to do that. Okay. Moving on to Memorial Building. I'm sorry, Carlton, what was that?
No, it's required that we keep records of all that stuff, and I think we'll have that discussion in a little bit.
Right, okay. Application update, Memorial Building. Okay, we have Michael's answers to questions, and I know I printed that one out. I thought I printed it out. Okay, let me just go back to.
I can go over that, Gina, if you want, if I find it myself.
Okay, sounds good.
No, don't. Maybe I spoke too soon. Hold on. Oh, come on. All right. So I think the way we left the memorial building is there were a lot of questions, and so Josh or Gina forwarded me some of the questions. So I tried my best to answer it. So is there a floor plan? I did. I attached the revised floor plan, which I don't think I need to share that on the screen, but I think you have it. Everybody should have it. It takes the bathrooms in the the middle section of that big room, and takes those away and tucks them behind, at least on the south side, tucks that behind the wall, a better preserving of the viewscape. And then on the north side, it places it just beyond that little opening for the rear egress. Both of them are handicapped accessible as they have to be. Both of them are required. There was some notion that we might get a waiver, and I'm told by our architects that it's very unlikely that they would approve a waiver for the bathrooms. We can very likely get away with one restroom on the lower level. That is doable. They probably would require that it at least be rough plumbed for a second bathroom if that time ever came, but that's fine. That's not a big deal. So otherwise, the plan preserves, the existing, with the exception of the bathrooms, the plan preserves all the existing walls. I think one of the overriding principles of the Secretary of Interior standards is that you try to make as many of the quote unquote improvements as reversible as possible. And I think we have done that on the interior here as best we can. We are also ironically bringing the building back to its original, with the exception of the bathrooms, the original floor plan, eliminating the closet, the weird janitor's closet that blocks the small set of stairs that goes up to the attic. So that's eliminated. We eliminate the exterior, ugly exterior, plastic wood ramp in the back, not the ramp, but the platform. And what else? And this I mentioned the stairs. So that is sort of the objective. Nothing changes in terms of the exterior. We still are looking to try to create that accessibility in the front entrance and do it without requiring any kind of mechanical lift or elevator. So I think that is pretty self-evident there. So the architect, gave us, unless you really blow it up, it's hard to see, but gave us just sort of a rough rendering of what the inside could look like. And again, you see the wall there on both sides to accommodate the bathroom. But then past that, there are walls, half walls, which honestly don't need to be half walls. Those could be glass partitions to sort of open up the space and keep it as light filled as it currently is. So that's kind of the objective. So I covered the handicap ramp. So that's very basically the outline of the improved floor plan. The other question was contemplated use of the building for the town offices. So I guess I obviously wrote what I wrote there. The ultimate goal here is to do this, get this building renovated, do it the right way, regardless of the use, so that it needs the bathrooms, and it needs, we certainly need the space right now to accommodate our DPW department and house its administrative component, as close to the academy building as possible. So we figured out a financing mechanism that's going to be give us the money that we need to do the project right. And I've mentioned many times that I'm not interested in doing any project unless we do the project right. And that certainly is the philosophy that we've been using over the last 6 years on whatever project. It doesn't always work that way, but sort of if we don't have that philosophy, we run the risk of creating a mess for the people that come after us 20 years from now. The Mitchell School is a good example of that, although I don't think anybody contemplated that it was going to fall down. But we've done a lot of things to make sure that we do projects the right way. So in order to finance this, and it is an expensive project, but in order to finance this, we've set aside $700,000 from the original bond issuance back in 2014, I guess, or the authorization back in 2013, 2014. So we've set that aside. We've looked at the water and sewer enterprise funds, which have very healthy balances. We've calculated, a $500,000 stream of funding from those two enterprises, and then obviously the CPC. So, excuse me, this would give us, as I say, the opportunity to do this job right. We don't, I think there was a question about, do we need some sort of vote, town vote to change the use? We don't. Obviously that building was used as a library up until the 70s, when the library moved over to its current place. And then after that, I believe it was the school offices. After that, it was, Selectman's office for a number of years. And so it's gone through a bunch of different uses. And quite frankly, what we're trying to do now is make sure that the exterior and interiors are done to accommodate whatever use. Right now, that use is for DPW administrative staff. There's nothing that we're going to do in that building that's going to preclude, essentially moving them out one day and doing something else with it, as it sits. So there's no hard construction going in there that's going to, require a lot of time and effort and money to convert the use. So that we wanted to make sure that that was the case. Then somebody pointed out that there were other buildings similar to this in the state. I don't doubt that. I think we took, as I mentioned, we took that quote and acknowledged that it came out of the 2002 master plan, which evidently was incorrect. So certainly, we've seen, I think Steve has sent us pictures, and we've seen other similar styles of library memorial buildings in the state. So, but that's where we got the information for that one. Let's see, so community opinions, community support. So I guess I would defer back to the way the original appropriation was presented. It was a ballot vote, and that's, similar to the Academy building, the argument that we made when we applied for CPC funds with the Academy building is that ultimately, voters have decided that they want to appropriate, and they did so. So that's obviously as direct a line of community support as you can get. I'm not tone deaf to the fact that there are people that don't like this project. I think that opposition isn't because of the project itself. I think that opposition, from what I sense, is it's because of the use of the building. But quite frankly, we desperately need to get DPW into its space. I've mentioned before that our efforts to build in water and sewer office space at the water treatment plant, which is about to get underway, was not favorable. DEP looked unfavorably on that, and quite frankly, that wouldn't be the appropriate. They looked unfavorably on that because of the public, the potential public access to an area that wouldn't otherwise be accessible to the public, and security reasons essentially. So that option was off the table. We've looked at what we could do at the highway barn in order to accommodate the administrative staff. Again, having the public at the High Street Highway Department is not optimal. There's nothing illegal about it. There's nothing inappropriate, but it's not optimal to have the public in there driving around, heavy equipment, employees, and so forth. So, so this looked like a perfect opportunity to get this building done the right way, house the DPW offices for some period of time, and make sure that we could secure the funding to make, do the project, as I mentioned, the right way. So let's see. So alternative uses for the building. We, in the ideal world, I think it would be incredible to have that building serve as some sort of museum. But quite frankly, right now, Bridgewater just can't afford that expense. We are looking to create community and cultural space using the town hall right now. And that the effort is being partially grant funded. The feasibility phase of that is being partially grant funded through Mass Cultural Council. We'll continue down that path, and we will look to, once the feasibility study is done and recommends the appropriate uses given all the other factors, then we'll certainly be going to Mass Cultural Council looking for capital funding to accomplish that. So we definitely are looking to create community use building, and that entire town hall, I suspect, will be community use. The entire thing will be community use. The other thing that I can tell you that, and this is only very recently have we begun to have these conversations. Bridgewater Library is going to be in a position for, we think, quite some time where the typical traditional library building use is just not going to be there. We're not going to be able to house lots of people on a daily basis. We may have to transition to the very old style library where you come in and you ask for a volume and staff goes and gets the volume for you and brings it back out. So this COVID thing has really turned their lives upside down to some extent, and it's very hard to plan. However, we are looking, no matter how you dice it, we're looking at a fair, very sizable amount of space in the library that's underutilized. And to the extent that we can use a portion of the library building itself for the kind of sort of artifact and museum display that we really should have and need to have, that is going to be probably a more appropriate location, for more appropriate use of that extra square footage. Right now, it also would comply with some of the restrictions that the Board of Library Commissioners place on the use of that building. So I certainly don't want to promise anything like that, because we're not in a position to do that, but we certainly are looking at that long term. So that's kind of where the library, where the town hall and the memorial building are all sort of in conjunction. So definitely we need to, we need to present our proposals and our plans to Mass Historic, and nothing can go on until Mass Historic actually approves what we are looking to do to that building. So we definitely know that. Then a question was asked about maintenance, which is for Bridgewater is a very appropriate and absolutely critical question. All I can tell you on that is the same thing that we mentioned in the Academy building application, is that in the same approach we've used to build our staff back up to some sort of level that's sustainable. but can get the work done. And that is to very gradually fund areas where we know are in critical need of increased funding. So that's certainly certainly maintenance and support of all the buildings. We've added some money into this year's budget for that. We've also added money into the capital fund that the council has in front of them right now in order to address immediately some of the needs, exterior needs of the town hall and the academy building as well. So, so that's a point well taken, and that's something that requires just consistent yearly increases, which we had been doing. Our budget this year, we unfortunately probably will be eliminating the facilities director position. It's been funded for the past year. We've been out looking for somebody to fill that position unsuccessfully. So at least for a temporary period of time, that's we're going to have to do what we're doing now, and that is pay one of our inspectors a monthly stipend to fill a lot of that role, and otherwise we pass it around amongst my office and so forth. So let's see, a question was asked about the architect. It was TAP A. I'm pretty sure most people met Jeff Hoover and Cesar when they came down to talk about that. So they're the same firm that was hired. Well, we hired them to do all the 3 projects, the academy building, the fire station roof, and the memorial building, all at the same time. So the town's building committee chose them, and they seem to have worked out pretty well for us. So that's who the architect is. Oh, I did. Yeah, Paul, somebody that asked for the disabilities disabilities communication. I do have that. I've got it via email, so I have to forward that along. It's not very instructive. It just says, you know, sorry, you didn't get funding this year. We got two disability grant requests that were not funded. Both of them, quite honestly, use the same language. You know, there were many applicants this year that applied for the grant funding, and you were not selected. On one of those grants, I called myself, and I think it was probably a year and a half ago or more. And one of the issues that was not in the grant application, but they told me over the phone, was that we needed to have our disabilities assessment done prior to capital funding. So we tried to get that done. We tried to get money to do that assessment, and that grant was also denied because of the purportedly the popularity of those grant programs. Yeah, I made a mistake about Bedford Street. That's what happens when trying to be a one-armed paper hanger sometimes. But the spreadsheet is correct, and that is not the Bedford Street property, which, by the way, should be closing. Has to close before June 30th, so we're coming up very soon on that closing. But that's just an aside. I was trying to, I did really looked at the numbers again. I couldn't quite figure out where the confusion was about the budget narrative, but I'm happy to talk about that in a sec. I think that's the same question. And so there are escalation calculations calculated into that, as well as owner's project manager, which I didn't reference, I don't believe, in the answer, but those are both accommodated, both escalation and the OPM is accommodated in the PM&C estimate. And then, so on the, so I did, somebody asked a question about the breakdown, what pieces of funding would be used for what pieces of the project. So on a historic renovation, CPC can cover essentially all, certainly disabilities as well, can cover just about all of the funding. That's the way we did the Academy building. We actually started it out trying to do this exercise, the building committee did, tried to do this exercise, talking about, okay, should we be paying for the linoleum flooring, or should we pay for the carpet tiles, or, those aren't historic, so we'd have to pull those out. The CPC or the DOR's issued guidance, and as well as I think the Department of Interior, the Secretary's guidance. If you're using CPC funds, the CPC fund, you don't have to delineate every single minor expense. So for CPC, clearly the handicapped access, the handicapped bathrooms are fundable. Those right there will probably far exceed the 500,000 that we're asking for. So I mean, we could arbitrarily designate certain pieces of the memorial building to be funded by the CPC, but you don't have to do that. Certainly the windows, we're going to do something very similar to what we did with the front windows, or on the front portion of the Academy building, and make sure that those get renovated properly. So that obviously is also an eligible expense. So that there was a question, I don't see it, but there was a question about whether or not water and sewer funds can be appropriately used for this. Absolutely. So those enterprise funds can be used for any capital improvement related to the enterprise, and in this case, the office space is what the enterprise funds would be funding. So that is appropriate. Disabilities Commission, I reached out to David Frim again. He was confused by my question, which is not certainly not unheard of. And I will get that letter from him. The schematic. So the schematics are done, a little bit later in the process. We don't want to do schematics because that's a costly proposition until we know that there's funding available. So by analogy, for anybody that's involved in the Mitchell School project, we did the feasibility study, and then only once the vote happened to fund the project did we move into the schematic phase. So and actually we did the same thing with the Academy building. We didn't go to the voters. We didn't go to the CPC with schematics. That came after we knew that we would be able to fund the project. So absolutely, the CPC will be the first to see the schematics when they come about. And then there was a question about the proposed office space. So there's really not, having worked in that building, I think there's not too much, not too little in terms of office space. There are two tables on the first level floor plan. There are two larger tables, and those are quite honestly there to sort of give you scale. But it would not shock me at all to have those tables in the finished building. One of them probably will be an electronic plan table, which is a table that projects the electronic version of plans in a lot greater detail than you can on a small 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 4:17 or whatever the size is. But that's everything we do now is collaborative. We do a lot of collaborative work. Right now we're doing it via Microsoft Teams or Zoom, which is quite honestly exhausting, but it's what we do. But when we get back to some sense of normal, we know that we're going to have project proponents coming in, wanting the water and sewer superintendent to look at plans similar to what we have down in the Academy building, plenty of spaces for people to spread out plans and have broad discussions. And quite honestly, the meeting space that's going to be needed for the folks in that space. So I think that it accommodates the appropriate number of staff, and it accommodates the work that plan to accommodate the work that's anticipated to go on in the building. So I think that is. And I also think there's a misconception that it's really 3 employees, the water sewer superintendent and the 2 staff that are going down. That's not the case. We're looking for this to be all of that, as well as facilities, the facilities position, the DPW position, and then the support, and then the town engineer, and then the support for those folks. So it will accommodate those uses, and I think quite well, hopefully. And I think that was it. So I'm happy to go over the details if anybody wants to, or I know who's still here. Jennifer's here, and Tony's here. So if you need me to go any deeper into anything, just let me know.
Okay. Thank you for that, Michael. I like that the bathrooms were moved. That was a big plus, and more museum space. Just a quick question on the museum space. I like that an area is set up. It goes along with the original purpose of the building. If, say, somebody wants to take their kids in and look at whatever artifacts are in there, will that room be open for people within reason for, regular business hours, that somebody could just go in and look around?
The short answer is yes. I did neglect to mention one thing. I've gotten a couple questions about the building, the display space, and if nobody's really watching, won't everything get stolen? And that's obviously we'll have cabinetry. I think Cesar's designed sort of some built-in cabinetry on the bathroom, on the exterior side of the bathroom walls. And also display cases positioned. So those obviously will all be locked. I mean, we would never, just display, valuable artifacts just out and about. So that's one thing. And to answer your question, Gina, yes, all our public buildings, well, that's not true. All our buildings that are public, absolutely, come on in. I don't think anybody wants to go to the sewer treatment plant. I don't know that we really want people going to the sewer treatment plant, or for that matter, the water treatment plant.
I'll pass on that one.
Only people like me who do deal with that stuff.
I can tell you that the reason I got into municipal government is, well, I won't say it in the meeting, but
I know, because I listened to your Friday that you talked about that.
I got put on a siting committee that was designed to site a sewer treatment plant. And if you want to be really mean to any of your citizens, just put them on a board that has to site a sewer treatment plant somewhere. And that's, but it was fascinating. We got to tour like 5, 6, 7 different plants throughout the Northeast, and that got me hooked on municipal work and municipal service. So it was a really crappy way to get hooked.
See, I was going to say something similar to that, but
the meeting's been
actually
recorded.
I was going to refer it. I was going to refer it to the job.
Michael,
Right.
I missed a little bit on the bathroom stuff. It's one on the main floor now and one on the lower floor.
No, I'm sorry. So the code requires 2, which is, let me see if I can bring it up here for myself. The code requires 2. I think there's, and that's pretty strict. I know I had a conversation with David Moore a while ago about trying to look to see if we could get a waiver on that. And with the number of people either in the offices or the number of people as an assembly space, no matter how you dice it, you're going to have 2 on that main level. On the lower level, given the intended use of lower level, then we can probably get away with 1
Okay.
1 bathroom there. So,
No, thank you for clarifying.
yep.
Okay.
I had Michael, I had a question about the circulation when people enter the building, the proposed circulation. It looks like on the side there's a counter. Is the anticipation that like any public would come in and take a right in that first vestibule and then go to?
Let me just pull it up here. So on the revised floor plan of the first level, so you come in and really it's really exactly the way it is right now. It's a little different, obviously, because of the bathrooms, further back. But when you come into the building, there's Cesar, just placed. There's a glass top display case there, and that's just sort of to allocate the space, because that could be perfectly great space to use for display purposes. But that's what's straight ahead. So if you come into the building and you take an immediate right, it shows a counter, but again, he's placing that just to give you some scale and context. So so there's none of this furniture placement is designed as permanent furniture placement. It's designed to give you sort of a context and a relative size of the workspace versus the size of the room. So so I probably should share the screen so I can point, but so straight ahead, the glass display case, straight ahead to the left and to the right on a smaller scale, there are cases there. The counter that's in that office on the north side, as you walk into the right, that counter could just as easily be additional display space as well. So there's there's nothing set in stone in terms of furnishings. I guess that's my point, Steve.
Okay. I was just thinking about it, how you were mentioning the new normal is going to be kind of social distancing. Can you actually give me the full count of staff? Because I know that on this, it looks like there's about 6 staff going in there. Is that?
Yep. So we're still shooting for 6. So you've got a DPW director, a water and sewer superintendent. You've got a town engineer and a facilities director, and then you've got 2 support staff. And eventually you may have 3 support staff. But for right now, that's, what you see is what the furniture is what we're planning for in terms of occupants.
All right. Yeah, so one of the things I've actually been working on with what I do every day is like setting up buildings for social distancing. And so like, if this is going to be the new normal, some of these conference tables that now have 6 might only potentially fit 4. So it's like we really have to look at like how many, and if there are more staff that are potentially going in there, we're really kind of it's that social distancing risk is going to be kind of going up of making it too cramped.
Yeah, I think honestly that's our challenge. We have, even what you see there obviously was designed pre-COVID, but the plexiglass separators, in the 2 staff, 2 staff rooms there. That's what you're going to see, very soon in the Academy building. So it's you're right. It's kind of at least our new temporary normal. But you do a lot more of this than we do. But if you know any good places to get cheap plexiglass, just let me know.
I'll check my sources. Yeah, no, I think that they just looking at it from the first layout, yes, I'm absolutely glad that the bathrooms are moved to the side and you retain that central opening, and kind of like the architecture of the building's shown more. And if everything's kind of in the front two rooms, if it is going with the temporary, where it's not non-permanent, it looks like it could potentially be workstations in the future if that was more museum space, if that ever happened. It seems like it's still fixable.
There's, as I said, Steve, there's nothing about this plan. You know, we've specialized in over the last 6 or 7 years, not recently, fortunately, but specialized in moving everybody at the drop of a hat. So honestly, the interior of this building is designed. You know, you could pick up the desks, pick up the computers, and move out, and you'd have a functional, usable space for whatever whatever the town thought was an appropriate museum space or rental space or gathering space, meeting space, whatever the case may be.
Great, thank you.
Okay, good. Other comments?
Yeah, Michael,
Other discussion? Shoot, go. You're on.
I liked where the handicapped ramp looked good. It kind of blended in there nicely. And what will there be, handicap parking out in the front of the building now?
We had pretty extensive conversations with the Disabilities Commission members, and so if you look, if you're looking at it now, if you're looking at the front entrance, the artist rendering of the front entrance, in order to get that gradual incline, and I know this was a calculation that Cesar was really didn't have trouble with, but he was finding it challenging. So if you look at the incline from the sidewalk level, it goes up and then then perpendicular to the building, and then parallel to the building, and then perpendicular to the building right up to the top of the front door. So to the extent that we can provide, and as you know, that this building is on an extremely tight lot. So there really is no place on the property to put handicap parking. That said, David Frim had a great suggestion, and that was right in the front of the building, if there was a way to sort of bump in and provide a couple of handicap spots in the front. It's still street parking, but at least you bumped it in so that you can somewhat get off of the travel lane a little bit better. That would certainly help provide that handicap parking, and it really completely depends on the slope calculations and how far that walkway has to come out into the sidewalk in order to make that work. But that's we'll not that it's correct, but we'll certainly have handicap spots across the street in the lot, the Academy building lot, and we'll have do whatever we can do to create that bump in right in front of the memorial building to at least provide hopefully 2 spaces.
And that won't hurt pedestrians walking the sidewalk either?
That's really the question.
Yeah.
That's really the ultimate question, is how much, I can't remember the required sidewalk width. I can't remember if it's 4 feet or 5 feet now, but you're going to have to maintain that. But even if we can get a 2-foot bump in, it's something that provides a little bit of additional safety. So I guess that's my long answer to your short question. Yes, we're looking, that's an important piece to be, we have to be able to provide, if not for legal, not legally, then certainly, morally, we have to provide, some
Yeah.
kind of access to that, or parking access that's near that building.
And my other question was, using the enterprise funds, I mean, we have a water issue in areas of town. But that won't cut into the work that needs to be done?
Nope, that's a great question. So Tony Solmonti and his team have done a great job of planning out, the financial aspects of not just this project, but certainly the water treatment plant project. So we have underway, we had a pre-construction meeting today on the new water plant. So it's a $16 million water plant. And last year, year before, we began to adjust the rates to accommodate that. We also are very careful about booking money back into our reserves, into the enterprise reserves, to offset some of the costs of that plant that aren't necessarily subject to the state revolving fund grant funding. So we've accommodated that. We've accommodated this building. We've accommodated what we think will be, we know will be some principal forgiveness through the state revolving fund. And I think we're in pretty darn healthy shape there, and we have a really good handle on how the rates are going to relate to the payments on the debt that we're going to have to make once the water treatment plant comes online, as well as water line replacement project. We just wrapped up a water meter replacement project, which has been great because it substantially reduces our operating expenses on meter readings. So I think we're in good shape there. We've done a lot of work in that regard.
Okay, good. Other questions or comments, discussion?
I have a couple. Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you for the details information. I will say that I've done a lot of reading on what you advised me to take a look at, and that's the IRG 1914. And I can't find anything where it says that you don't have to provide us with enough detail in order to make a decision on this. So that said, I do appreciate the changes to the design interior. I'm still concerned that we have a negative letter of support from the Historical Commission. I think it's been addressed through the front end handicapped, and also that we have a handicap going in on the backside. I still think we could do more in terms of display, but that as it may, see, what else did I have? Oh, when do you plan to go before the Architectural Review Board for the handicapped accesses?
Again, that's, as soon as we know that we can fund the project, then we'll go before all the boards that we have to go before. So that's, and I don't know if we have to, I don't know, Carlton, if we have to go before the Architectural Access Board on this, because I think it's providing access, and I don't think we're looking for any particular waiver. So I don't know if we have to go before that board, to tell you the truth.
Well, I think you do, but that's up to you guys to figure out. But I would strongly urge that you do that regardless when you get final design.
Yeah.
Because there's a memo, a motion right now, unless there's other comments.
I was going to add one other piece. So one of the reasons that we opted to go this route was that we pay an annual, it's probably just shy of $4,000 on an annual basis, just to license any chairlift or elevator in town. So we've got an elevator, obviously, in the police department, the academy building unavoidable, library obviously unavoidable. So we looked at this project and we thought, okay, if we're going to plan this for the long term and we're going to do it right, can we avoid a mechanical lift that's going to require an annual expense that's only going to keep climbing? Cesar, did tackle that and came up with what I think is, the right thing for Bridgewater.
Okay, so Josh, if you could put up the motion that I put, it's called motion 1. If you, I'm going to read it just to keep us moving. So I move that the town council, this would be the submission to the town council. So I move that the town council appropriate $350,000 under the Community Preservation Act fund from the fund balance CPA historical PERS account, object 324200 for the proposed 2020 Memorial Build renovation / restoration project. The recommended funding is for the following purposes contingent on Mass Historical Commission approval of interior and exterior modifications per the historical preservation restriction they hold on the building. 1, construction of the Architectural Review Board approved final accessibility plans to the basement of the memorial building. Funds to be released following notification of the CPC of MHC and ARB approval. For construction of the Architectural Review Board approved final accessibility plans for the main entrance to the memorial building. Funds to be released following notification to the CPC of MHC and ARB. Approval of the project concept and construction elements by the Historical District Committee, and submission of the building maintenance plan. Inspection frequency, whether it's quarterly, annually, 2 every 10 years, whatever. Key building equipment and systems inspection, test report, content requirements, and any other maintenance items deemed relevant to the town's facility manager, to the CPC, and provided to the CPC prior to commencing construction. Basically, we have $355,000, $356,000 as of the May 2019. That's the motion. So I should wait until we get a second.
Harry, second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Discussion. I just have a question, a quick question. Then I'm still reading.
Yeah, Gina, I was trying to finish some reasoning from my part. So the account fund.
Oh, okay, go right ahead. Go ahead.
There's $356,000 in the as of May in the funds and the historic preservation reserve, and we know that we're going to add at least $74,000 if what we talked about earlier tonight goes through. And the other one is that I think that we would consider recommending additional historical preservation funds for rehab of historical elements of the building pending submission of the final design specifications and a detailed construction budget by source, whatever source of funds we're going to have, relative to the historical and non-historical elements of the building. This is per DORIRG 19-15 guidance. I think this is sufficient for you to get the project well underway, meet your goal of getting the $700,000 from the historical operational override for the memorial building, and leave us with the room to actually come back and fund stuff if you come up with a shortfall. So that's the first motion that I'm putting on the table that Terry has seconded. Now,
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Okay, my
I'm done.
question
Is that it?
No. Okay, my question, Colin, why you're cutting it from the 550,000 requested to 350,000?
Well, that's one of my questions to the town manager. What specific language was used in the 2013 operational override for the memorial building? I believe it was historic preservation, correct?
So yeah, debt exclusion.
Debt exclusion, yeah.
Let me see.
But we can also take out our undesignated funds too.
We don't,
Okay, even though
Gina, I hear that, but I need to understand what the, we need to understand what that historical debt exclusion was for. Because I believe the town manager conveyed to me that there's about a million one in terms of eligible CPA funding to the building. But if the town has already given us 700,000 for that type of activity, then we only need to come up with 350,000 to meet the historical preservation information. That's my rationale.
So Carlton,
Okay.
just so I'm clear, what did I say? What did I
You
say?
sent me a note this weekend that said there are 1,092,000 and change in terms of eligible elements of the plan.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And the 700,000 plus 350 gives you that is essentially that amount of money.
okay, I see the rationale for it. Thank you.
So I see. Okay. So just so I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately. The vote. It was my recollection is that the vote, the ballot vote, the debt exclusion vote, was the Academy building, the Memorial building, the fire station roof, and the high school, the old high school roof replacement project.
Correct.
And I think it was fairly generic. I'm going to see if while you talk, I'm going to see if I can find the actual question.
Well, that's my question, because if we've already put taxpayer money in for historical preservation under that debt exclusion, then I don't see us being able to
I'm
get
sorry.
more money.
So here that I do. Okay. So CPC, are you talking just generally in terms of historic, or are you talking because the CPC only funded the Academy building. The CPC did not fund any portion of the Memorial building or obviously the town hall roof or the old high school roof.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm being unclear. What was the debt exclusion for the Memorial building specifically for?
I think it was just, let me look it up. Pretty sure that it was very generically worded. All these things are drafted by bond counsel.
Gina, just to let you know, I'm sorry I was a little bit late.
Okay,
I just came in. I'm sure you saw me through the video feed and everything.
I did. Welcome.
Yep.
Can I ask a question just while Michael's looking for that information?
Sure.
Is there a reason you wanted to request the funds from the Historic Preservation Fund instead of from the undesignated?
There's not a specific reason. It just seemed to make more sense.
Yeah, I guess I would recommend taking it from the undesignated, just because, well, there's more funds in that fund, and also it can be used for any project. So if you sort of a best practice that I've seen is that it's sort of better to pull from the undesignated fund because that tends to be larger than the reserves, because the reserves you can only pull from those reserves for projects in historic preservation, open space, etc.
I'm open to that amendment by the committee if they so wish.
Mm-hmm. Right. I would go along with Anna, because it seems that's what we've done for other projects recently. We've taken them out of the undesignated, and when Laurie does her magic that she does in the accounting, she puts it into the right category. So even though it's coming from undesignated, all our reports would show that it was for a historic. So she takes care of all that on her end. But lately,
It's really just an account. It's just an
right,
account.
it's an
Sorry.
accounting thing. Right.
It's just It's an accounting issue, so the committee can move to amend it. In fact, I will make that friendly amendment right now to take it from the reserve, unfunded, what's the reserve title?
Undesignated.
Undesignated fund, whatever that number is in the accounting system. That's my friendly amendment.
I'd second that, taking out of the undesignated.
So,
What's the exact amount in the undesignated? Just
355 and
No, that's in
$962.
In the
Designated.
undesignated,
No, that's historical, right?
there's
Undesignated,
769,000. Give or
Say again.
700,069.
The undesignated fund.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in the chat.
So, Gina, not to run your meeting, but basically you have to take a vote on this.
yep.
have discussion first before we vote.
Yeah, I'm just looking for more discussion, if there's any other discussion on it. And I think Michael is looking up wording.
In fact, the amendment.
Yeah, take your time.
Oh,
Mike.
I'm sorry. I see what you're saying. We need to vote on our amendment. No,
Correct.
yes. Okay. Josh, roll call on discussing the amendment or accepting the amendment.
Sorry, I didn't hear who seconded that.
That was Steve Rogan.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
I think it was Steve.
Okay, Gina,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Carlton,
Yes.
Harry,
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, discussion on the amendment, which kind of goes along with the original.
No, the
Michael,
amendment. Gina, we voted the amendment. We have to discuss the main motion.
we have to what? You got cut up. Colin, can you repeat that? It was broken up.
I'm sorry, I suggested that we can discuss the main motion while Michael looks that up.
Right. Okay, that's what I was saying. The motion for that, discussion for that. I'm sorry.
I just had a really quick question.
Sure.
Just, I know I was a little bit late, so I know I don't mean to be repeating things here, but just out of curiosity, I know, did they change the plans for like the plumbing and everything? Is that all
Yeah,
different?
they moved the bathrooms. Yep.
Was that sent in the email as far as the layout is concerned?
Mhm.
With the schematic?
It was.
Yes.
I think it was in.
Okay.
I think it was in. It was from last Friday.
Oh, the email.
I think it was in the. Right. I think it was the amended. I can't remember. We kept Josh busy this weekend with everything going out.
Yeah, I know. I think I got like 4 emails from Josh. Thank you, Josh, by the way. I know it's a lot to organize and send out. Okay, yeah. Let me just hunt this because I just want to just take a look at it.
Okay. I'm not sure if it was. I think it was the amended, but I'm not positive. But I think I'm almost positive it was the amended one. Okay, well, Kevin's looking that up, and Michael's looking up his part. Other discussion?
So Gina, I can add, I can't find the ballot vote, but the ballot vote essentially is just a vote that approves the debt exclusion. It's usually pretty straightforward, doesn't even include dollar figures. But the order that the council voted was to approve indebtedness for the purpose of paying costs of renovating the Academy building located at 66 Central Square in Bridgewater, and for renovations to the Memorial building located at 25 South Street, and for renovations to the firehouse located at 15 School Street. So it was pretty generic.
Generic, yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay.
And
Now-
the key word is renovations.
Yeah.
That implies, I'm sorry to be implying, but that implies historical funding because you can't change the building without going through the restriction.
My guess is that wasn't contemplated at the time, but I don't know.
So I still think that 350,000 gets you to the place that you can actually get real diagrams and you can meet the June 30th deadline, and then we can talk more about specific details that might be not fun.
Okay, Michael, does that work for you?
I think we can make that work. I do want to make sure that, and I think that's appropriate, but I do want to make sure that we can act fairly quickly if and when the time comes that we come back to the CPC looking for, for whatever that delta is. I want to make sure that we can do that.
Okay, I would say, or hope that we could, seeing as we got all our most of the nitty gritty accomplished now. If you came back to us and said, I don't know, another 100,000 for X, Y, and Z that falls under CPA guidelines, I would hope that it could go through quick. And,
Yeah, and
I was looking through last week. I was finishing up my annual report before I'm doing it. I promised to be one of the first ones for next year. But I was going back through minutes for the year to make sure I didn't miss anything. And it was like last spring, a year ago, we were discussing the memorial building. So I would hope if you come back to us, it wouldn't take a year.
Michael, I will guarantee you, I will be the first one to push for additional money, and it won't take us 4 months.
Or a year?
I certainly will come back, and obviously with a more meticulous cost breakdown, you'll be able to see exactly what we'd be asking for funding for. So I appreciate that.
Okay, sounds good. Other discussion? Harry, Jean, anybody?
No.
Whoever else is here. Okay, Harry, any comments?
So it would just be the three. Just had a really quick thing. Sorry, Harry, did you have something? Did you have a comment?
No, I'm all set.
Okay. Thanks, Harry.
Yeah, so that 350,000 will come out of our undesignated, but the total cost is going to be higher than that, right? Because it's going to even out.
Originally their application asked for 550,000. Calton's recommending to move his motion to make it 350,000 based on figures that Michael gave him over the weekend on what of that 550,000 plus the 700,000 that they have from a town meeting vote, our ballot question vote a handful of years ago, which would come to like 12,500 if I can add right.
Sure.
But I think that's right. But what Michael has conveyed to Carlton this weekend, that of that 12.5, just over, and Carlton probably has the exact amount, just over, I think 1.2 million is eligible for CPA funds. So of that, the difference between that 1.2, I think, million and 12.5, that's what Carlton is cutting it down 200,000. Motioning to cut it back to 350,000. With the option, if they find they need more money, they can come back to us.
Got it.
That's not part of the motion.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Did I say that right, Carlton?
Yes, that's not, the coming back is not part of the motion, that's information.
Right.
So just to reiterate, what we're saying that we're willing to fund with the $350,000 is the construction of an architectural review board approved final accessibility plan to the basement of the memorial buildings. Funds to be released following notification. We're also saying that we want to see the architectural review board and final approval and accessibility plans for the main entrance to the memorial building. So we're dealing with the accessibility question specifically. And we have to have approval from of the project concept from the construction documents by the Historic District Committee. And we also need to have a submission by the town of a building maintenance plan. That has been continually, my rationale there is it's been continually a problem. And we're going to fund maintenance. We're going to fund maintenance. I've heard that for 5 years. It hasn't happened. The Academy building has serious maintenance problems. And I don't want to see that here. So I'm asking for a specific plan that addresses the things that I read off earlier. Inspection frequency, what's going to be inspected, whether or not, what's going to happen if I didn't add this, but whether they're going to clean the outside of the building every year so we can get all the pollen and other junk that makes it look bad. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for in a maintenance plan, not that we're going to do it. So that's basically what I do. And I will also be offering an amendment if this passes, that basically we have a CPC consultant prepare a formal transmittal memo regarding this motion.
Okay, Josh, can we see the motion again, please?
Sure, give me just a moment.
Just, I think I followed everything Carlton said, but I just want to read it.
Carlton, what's specifically wrong with the Academy building for maintenance?
There's some back door entrance problems that have a gap from an energy perspective. There's a huge gap in the back door below the clown clerk's office. There's paint peeling on some of the windows already. The entrance, the handicap access has lips that people can trip over. There's a whole lot of problems with that building.
Okay.
And I suppose the $25,000 that they're trying to get into the budget will cover that. But it's really essential that we put some real plans together, not just promises. And that's the reason I'm putting it in there in this motion is so that the town manager has a reason to go to the town council for getting maintenance money.
Sure. I can get on with that. Absolutely. Yeah. Would that be part of the contract, or would the town would maintain it?
What I understand,
It has to be, yeah.
what Mr. Dutton has indicated is that the water and sewer enterprise account will do the maintenance of that particular building. That's the funding source. But I want to know the who, what, when, where, and why elements.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm on board with that.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So,
Sure.
Carlton, so is that you're proposing that the 350,000 is only going to be used for the creation of these plans, or are you saying that 350,000 is for the construction of the things from the plans?
Good point. Really, I'm saying plans, and once the plans are in, the funds would be released for whatever I guess they need. But I suppose we should add that and work any leftover construction money. But I think my intent was construction.
Because I guess I should sort of interpret what I think you're saying, but the way that it's worded in the motion is a little, I'm reading it as the 350,000 is to fund these 4 plans. But I think what I thought you were saying was that you want to make sure that the Architectural Review Board approves these plans, and then they can use the 350,000 for construction.
Yeah, I think we can add a fifth thing to that once approval is received, then the remaining money can be used for construction of those elements.
Would the original 550,000, would that have covered construction and plans?
Right.
We
That's
don't-
what I'm concerned about.
We don't know because we haven't seen the details.
Well, usually it's usually together, right? It's not, it's not a separate thing. It's usually the budget is together. No?
But we're trying to help the town move forward because of all the
Right.
things we've all heard about this project.
Right.
So I'm
Okay,
trying
now,
to move forward without
okay, Carol,
committing.
in your one here, it says construction of architectural review board approved final accessibility plans to the basement of the building.
Yeah,
What
it's
about
construction, it's the money, you're right. The money is to go to the construction of an architectural review board approved final accessibility plans to the basement. The intent is that we would fund construction.
Yeah, okay, great. I just, that was just my concern. I think just the wording of the wording of the motion might just need to be changed.
What
Like,
what would you suggest that we change so we can move on?
I guess I would say, I would add a stipulation, like I would change the architectural review board to more stipulation.
Say it again?
Release following notification to the CBC of MHC and HIRP approval of accessibility plans. And the money is actually going to creating the ramp of the accessibility part of the, or to cover any construction of any of the accessibility components of the project, including the ramp and any other accessibility pieces.
So can you say that in a way that we can make an amendment to the motion?
Yeah, I guess.
And maybe Josh can type it in?
Yeah, I would also, I think you need to take out the submission of a building maintenance plan as underneath being covered under the $350,000, because that should just be part of the application also.
right, part of like the grant agreement?
I don't agree that.
But but you, from a.
We haven't even talked about it. We haven't talked about an agreement.
Right, but you can't use CPA funds to fund the creation of a maintenance plan, is my concern. So
I didn't say funding it, I said, oh. But you're right, it needs to be more clearly focused. So we can add it as a requirement.
yeah, so I would just, underneath this, I would just say, like, the recommended funding is for the following purposes, and then just say, like, is for the, I mean, I think you're just saying you want it to fund any of the accessibility components.
So you're suggesting that we add an item 5 that said the above is for the construction following approvals.
I would take out number 4 altogether.
Is that what you're saying?
And make it a requirement, because at the top part,
Or I would just,
okay, it's,
can
go
I,
ahead, Anna.
okay. So I would change it to read, I move the town council appropriate undesignated fund proposed 2020 Memorial Building renovation restoration project. Then I would add a sentence that says, funds are to be released following notification to the CPC of an MHC and ARB approved accessibility plan. And building and submission of a building maintenance plan, including all these things that are under 4. And then the recommending funding is for the purposes of, I think what you wanted to say under, from what I'm seeing on this, the construction of the accessibility plan.
Okay, but up above, I've already said that, the purpose of. In the memo that would be submitted under my next proposed motion. Josh, if you roll to the top, just go to the top of the document. Oh, I didn't put a purpose in there. I apologize. That's another one. Yes, I agree with that. It's just a matter of being able to have Josh catch up to it.
So Josh, I would just copy this, funds to be released following notification.
And Josh, if you need to.
I just need one.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Is Carlton going to say something? I lost him.
Can you type it up quickly and send it to him in chat?
Yeah.
I can't type. I'm slower than a 7-year itch with my typing.
Where's the- Funds are to be released.
Recommended funding is for the following purposes and contingent on Mass Historic and architectural review. They hold the building. Construction of an approved final accessibility plan. It's for construction of so it's funding the construction. Number 2, it's funding the construction of the main entrance.
Whoop. Purpose of constructing the accessibility.
In other words, we're not paying for the historical renovation of a downstairs bathroom. And we haven't even talked about the archival concept for the basement of the building yet. Michael, is that included in the funding? Is that downstairs archival room?
I'm sorry, Carlton, what was your question?
I was just checking in on you. You are planning to build an archival, a humidity and temperature controlled archival room in the basement of the memorial building, correct?
Correct.
Is that in the funding that you're proposing? And it is in the funding that you? Okay.
Yes. Yep, that's all there.
I think everything's together.
Josh, I sent it in the chat. Just,
Yep.
yeah, you got it.
So I will move that whatever changes we're entering in here, which I no longer can follow, be approved as an amendment. That's a motion.
You have to give me just a second here. Haven't seen
And
this
I'll
sheet.
change my to go along with Carlton's.
Does the
Are
accessibility?
you seconded it?
Yeah, I seconded.
Thank you. I have an unstable internet connection, so I may have to go on the phone, which is over here on the side.
A phone's a little bit faster if you dial in. I know that for Zoom. Does the accessibility component need, like the budget need to be separate from the main construction?
We had asked for that. We don't have it broken down. That's why I'm asking for this motion the way it is.
Right, okay.
We have a conceptual budget, not a real budget.
So, Anna,
Yeah.
related to the maintenance plan, you want me to insert number 4?
Yeah, whatever is after the submission, all the stuff that's in the parentheses. The IG inspection frequency, blah, 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 after submission of a building maintenance plan. I just want to put that up there. I didn't want to spend time typing all that out.
That makes sense. Okay. Gotcha.
And then you can also add it, just everything after the submission plan, yeah. Yeah. And I would just say, yeah, you can say period. And then the second sentence that I have, the recommended funding is for the purpose of constructing the accessibility components as outlined in the memorial building application and final accessibility plan mentioned above, such as a ramp. Maybe the such as a ramp should go after the accessibility components, but
Is the content, what we just need to make sure is the content's clear, not totally wordsmith it.
You wanted to insert ramp somewhere?
yeah, I would say such as a ramp comma, yeah. As outlined in the memorial building application and final accessibility plan mentioned above.
All right, hold on.
So does doing it this way, I know there was a June 30th deadline that, Michael, that you had for, was it the state funds? Does this affect, are we meeting that deadline so that you get the additional funds? I know I'm probably using the wrong words because.
No, I don't expect anybody at this hour of night to know municipal finance. No, that gives us enough confidence that we can proceed, through the planning and the schematic phase. So, but I appreciate that question, Steve.
And Michael, basically all you have to do is get the project started to make sure you retain the 700,000, right?
Right, we got it underway. So we need to give the go ahead to the architect, and we have to show substantial progress. So, yeah.
That was, thank you.
It's so unusual that we're separating the accessibility from the main.
There's two accessibilities there. I'm sorry to interrupt. There's the lower and there's the main entrance. Both
Yeah, I
of
just noticed that. So why don't we add in after, Josh, if you're following along, the MHC and ARB approved accessibility plans for the basement and main entrance.
And main entrance, right? We gotta mention that.
And then a comma and submission of a building maintenance
Am I
plan. Carlton, does
just
that
removing,
everything?
am I just removing number 4?
Just remove everything after the above. All of the 1, 2, 3, 4, because it's covered in the motion above now.
Oh, just remove all this?
And then I think everything should be captured now.
Okay, if we're taking from undesignated, or line account, fund balance, CPA,
We've already approved that.
reserve. No, we
We approved the amendment to take it from the undesignated fund.
right, but I'm saying for this motion right here, that just doesn't need to be in there, but it's just housekeeping, so it's not affecting it at all.
I don't think it's changing the intent of the motion, but we need to, and I've motioned that we would accept the changes, and Harry seconded it. And so now if everybody's happy with this and the funding and everything else, after comments, we can go forward.
Okay, I think the motion, the amended motion, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong on what we voted on. We're voting on the amendment to take from undesignated, not to make all these changes that Anna just suggested.
Right.
No, we already voted the undesignated fund. This is a new amendment.
Right, so now we have,
Accept those changes.
okay, it's a different amendment though. It's an amendment to the amendment.
No, it's not. It's an amendment.
Right.
Yes, it's an amendment to the amendment, to the document that was accepted.
Right,
Amendment.
right. So, okay, so we just need a motion and a second to accept the changes as Anna just put in.
Yeah, just for
Gina, it's on the table. Gina, the motion is already on the table. It's a vote that we need.
Okay, so you're just changing, I'm confused. You're just changing your original motion. We voted for discussion of, or actually we didn't, I don't think we voted on it, but we're discussing the original motion. Then it was amended to change it to undesignated.
Correct?
Now,
There's another,
right, so,
another amendment that changed the basic out of the memo or the motion. We need to vote on that. And then we need to vote on the whole thing.
right, okay, we need a motion to accept these changes for an amended then we vote
Gina.
on the whole.
Gina,
motion.
it's already on the table. Harry, I made a motion to accept the changes as she was working on them, and Harry seconded them. So it's on the table to be voted.
Okay, I disagree on that.
I'll withdraw the motion and let somebody else make it.
I do have a question on the motion. You see that big, like how it's like it's lined out in the second sentence, second line down there? Should we just,
Right.
should we admit that?
Gone. It's not there. It's deleted.
That's just my personal note. This isn't these aren't the minutes right here.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure
Right.
that was the final thing. Okay.
No, hell, you don't need to withdraw your motion. We just need to vote on these, to accept these changes, and then we vote on the whole motion.
Right. All we need to do is take a motion if everybody agrees to it. We need to take a vote on the amendment, the second amendment. It's on the table,
Right.
so you have to vote it.
Just take a vote. Yeah.
Vote to accept as amended.
Gina, I seconded these changes.
Okay, I thought you just seconded the changes for the funding source.
But I think I was the one that seconded that earlier.
Okay,
But so I think Harry is the one that seconded this motion. So
Yeah, we're just taking
Okay.
a second vote here.
okay, was I sleeping through this whole second motion? I had to be sleeping through it. Okay, Josh, are you set? Is this what we're doing?
Yeah, I think I got it.
Okay, I'm glad you do, because I don't. Okay, so,
Yeah, no worries, Gina. You're good.
well, I just want to make sure we're following the rules that we should be following.
Yeah, we're a committee. We all need to be on the same page. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. I'm trying to stay on this page here. Okay, so, okay, a roll call on the changes, then the whole motion, correct?
Yep.
Okay, Josh,
Gina?
roll call. Yes.
Jean,
Yeah.
Steve,
yes.
Carlton,
Okay.
Harry,
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now we need to vote on the amended motion.
Right, okay, roll call on the amended
I
motion.
move that we, okay, the main motion, right?
Yeah, I think we're already set up for that one.
Okay, so we just have to vote on the motion itself with the changes.
We'll start with you, Gina.
Yes,
Jean,
Yes.
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes. I like what it says.
Carlton,
If I didn't say yes,
and Harry.
Yes.
Thank you.
okay,
the
thank you.
motion passed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Motion.
What was that? Okay, motion passed. Thank you, and thank you, Michael, for your participation.
Well, thank you for your deliberation.
Okay. and again, feel free to come back and we'll get,
Before we leave this,
what was that, Carlton? You broke up again.
yes, before we leave this, I move the CPC consultant prepare a formal transmission letter to the town council for their considerations. Said memo to address the following 3 categories. 1, project goals, CPA funding eligibility. 2, recommended fund and specific account information. And 3, additional recommendations and key actions. It's just in the interest of being complete.
Oh, so like a follow through, if you will.
Well, we have to let the town council know through the town manager's office that we're recommending and what we're recommending and the fund that it comes from? I'm sorry, I'm just closing my curtains. I don't like them open when I'm sitting here.
Okay, you can change it to the town manager, but the recommendation is to the council.
Oh, sorry.
This is taken from examples provided in the IRG 19-14.
Right. Anna and I can work together to write something up on that and send it to the town council via the town manager. Sorry about that.
Question. I'm going to call the question, please. That doesn't require a vote. You just have to go right to vote.
Carol,
Okay.
I think your internet connection is we can only hear little bits and pieces.
Right.
Rules.
Carlton may want to call
Yep.
in on your cell phone so that it's just more seamless in terms of the audio.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can hear you.
I called the question. It's not discussable, and you vote on the motion.
Okay. Do we have a second to the motion? We have a motion, but no second yet.
Carlton, can you just repeat that list again?
We're not going to discuss it unless we get a second to the motion.
Second.
Okay. Discussion on it, Josh? I think that was on that paper too. Can you put that up for us, please?
Yeah, give me just a moment.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Kevin, you can be asking your question while Josh is putting that up for us to actually read it.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to hear that list for the motion again that we're going to submit to the council. I kind of missed what those 3 bullet points were again.
Okay, Josh has just put it up on the screen. It's at the bottom of that page.
Oh, okay. Yep. All right. Let me take a look.
So for discussion purposes, the reason I'm asking for that is that I've got a bit of feedback here. I'm asking for that.
We're missing it, Carlton. We can't hear it.
Debating over Zoom call is a special skill that we all need to learn.
Yeah.
Trying to unmute him.
Did you have him muted, Josh?
Did he call in by? I don't think he actually called in. There's a number.
Yeah, I think he just
He's muted.
And now he's muted. And it won't let me unmute him. He has to approve the unmute.
He needs to download Zoom app on his smartphone.
Now,
Okay,
who is it?
There we go.
let me try again. My bad. My apologies.
No problem.
That damn mute button over there. The reason I'm putting this forward is because I think the town council and the FinCom need to understand what's the reasoning behind this. And I think it's good practice to actually do a better job of communicating to the town council what the intention of this is, so they don't just get a thing, we want this amount of money for that. That's the only reason I'm putting it out here. I think it's worked very well in other towns.
That's fair enough. I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, Anna, are you okay with that? You're writing it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion?
Additional. So this is something that we're going to submit to the council, but then they're going to report back to us.
No.
No, we have to notify the council that we're recommending the 350, all this stuff from the Carlton's first motion.
Yeah.
we have to notify via the town manager to the town council that we're recommending it, then they take it up for discussion at their meetings, and they're the ones that actually approve the expenditure. So accountant, his intent here is to be very specific, like say for the fencing at Legion Field. I just sent a letter that said, we voted on such and such a date to approve, to recommend so much money for the fencing. But, and that's fine for something like that because that's all that was on it. But because this is a lot more complicated, this has worked for other towns, being very specific in what they actually send for approval. So
Okay.
that's his
Yeah.
intent for this.
Understood.
Right, Colin?
Thank you. Thank you.
Did I?
And I'm going to call a question because everybody's getting very tired and we have some important stuff.
Okay. Any other discussion first, real quickly? No, okay. Roll call, Josh,
Gina?
on the motion too.
Yep, Gina.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Carlton? Sorry, Carlton, I didn't hear you.
Yes.
Harry?
Yes.
Kevin? Kevin?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I can work
Gina?
on that. Great. Yes.
Hey, Gina. Can I just, I know
Michael?
Tony Salmonti's been at the meeting, and I think he joined to explain just the piece of the budget. So I don't know
Okay.
if you'd be willing to give him just a few minutes to explain the rationale for the CPC budget as it was presented.
Yep, that's fine with me. Any objections from the rest of the committee?
It's a little late, but go ahead.
Okay. Welcome, Tony. I thought you just jumped on because you wanted to hear our wonderful meeting.
I absolutely got nothing else to do tonight, so I figured. What we did to put together for the budget and the order was, we looked to determine what our estimated revenues were going to be. The number we were a little concerned about is the state match. A portion of that comes from Plymouth County. So we were a little conservative there. And the interest income, there's been a change in interest rates. We're not getting the return that we got the first half of this year. So the bottom line number that we submitted for source of funds is 747. I'll give this caveat. Any revenue above that will automatically close out to your undesignated fund balance at the end of the fiscal year. But this is the estimate that we use so that you can actually appropriate. So that's how we arrived at the 747. It was the last meeting I was at roughly a year ago when Jen came on board. The board that was in place talked about potentially wanting to contribute more than the minimum to the community housing reserve and the open space reserve and the historical reserve. So when Laurie and I were putting together the budget, we intended to max out what we felt was possible while still giving the administrative budget that you folks had, I think, close to what you had requested last fiscal year. So because it's a mathematical equation and you back into those community housing and the open space reserve and historical, we came up with a 13.75. In no way were we we're doing nothing more than we thought were expressing the wishes of the committee. Then the salaries are simply for the secretary. Purchase of services. I know last year you folks, and I think you still do, have an agreement with a consultant that helps you prepare your overall plan. And then you have some administrative expenses. So what we had typically done was ensure that it's no greater than 5% of the revenue that's being generated. So that's how we arrived at the 33,402. And then the principal and interest that's due on the debt that the committee has and the town has committed to is the last portion of that. And that's how we came up with the $747,000 appropriation.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
It's really that simple. What's most important is, again, if there's any surplus revenue, or if you don't expend monies that total the salaries or purchase of service or administrative expenses, those appropriations close out to fund balance as a surplus, and the revenue closes out to fund balance as a surplus. And that carries forward every year. So your undesignated fund balance will just naturally grow, and it has grown. And so that leads us to some of the reports that Laurie gives you. Laurie Guarini provides Gina some reports that explain what your balance sheet is, what your fund balance is, as well as what you've expended, as well as what revenue has come in for the fiscal year. So that, in a kind of a nutshell, hopefully that wasn't too broad brush, or I didn't use accounting jargon. If I did, I apologize. I'll be more than happy to clarify.
Okay, questions, comments?
Thank you, Tony.
No, okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. Understood that. The only issue I have is you didn't ask us in advance whether or not to do the 13th. You made an assumption. The 10%.
Well, I wouldn't label it an assumption. Again, I took the impression from the last meeting that I had with them, although it was a year ago, they said, can we up that amount? I said, yes, we can up it to any amount greater than 10%. So I took that as an intent. That number can be modified.
And we did tonight. Thank you.
I do want to make sure that the document that I got that is representing a modification, I imagine there is an intent there to reserve for future appropriation, but as it's worded, that's not what it's doing. So I can help with the wording on that so that you can in fact consider the alternate proposed budget. It's 6 1 half dozen the other. It really has no bearing on your ability to spend, not to spend. It's just semantics as far as I'm concerned. However, it is your committee and you have any right to present your budget as you see fit. But let me help you ensure that it's voted accordingly.
Okay. I give my thanks too for your explanation tonight. And I don't think it was just at random. I remember when we did meet with you, which seems like forever ago, but last year. So I can see where you did take that. And it was, I think in the current year's budget, it's also the 13.75. So it's something that's been in effect for a whole year, and we just never questioned it last year.
Well, it was a safe number last year.
That's correct.
Yeah. So
Correct.
that makes sense. It was it's a safe bet.
Right. So Karen, to catch you up, Carlton had motioned to put it back to the 10% and put the difference into our undesignated pot.
And the only request
Instead of,
yeah, can I just clarify? It would be reserved for appropriation. It wouldn't be undesignated. If you just call it reserved for appropriation, it would just go into a different account number, which means it's sitting there for future appropriation, which also makes it available at the end of the fiscal year for appropriation going forward. So it's a carried over amount from year to year until you actually spend from it. If you put it into undesignated, that's not a proper accounting of it, nor will allow you to spend it once the fiscal year is closed. So it may seem like a formality, but I think your intent is to be able to put away that money to spend it at a future time. I think that's your
Right.
intent.
Okay,
that's your
I
intent,
believe so.
I'd ask you to take into
Exactly.
consideration receipts reserved for appropriation.
Right.
And the fiscal year is going to reset fairly soon because the end of it is in end of
Yeah,
June.
but this is actually 21, so you're making a vote for FY21 at this point.
Right,
Okay.
and what Tony's saying is, as far as the spending of the money, if it goes into whatever he just called it, reserve for future.
Appropriation.
I really was listening, Tony. It can be spent at any time. If it goes into the other pots, isn't it that we have to wait till the free cash is
Well,
approved
I'll
and
be
everything like
more,
that?
yeah, let me be more specific. You can't put it into that other pot. That other pot is, it's not where you make appropriations from, unless it's after the fiscal year. So again, it seems like semantics, but if you just call it receipts reserved for appropriation, it still is put in a special account. It's reserved and it can be spent next year, but undesignated is not the account that you want to put it in. It's really semantics, but for an accounting purposes, that's how it needs to be handled.
So Tony,
Okay.
for your information, that's the one I suggested it go to, because that's what I saw in some accounting. It's the wrong it's going to the wrong account. We can correct that.
Yeah, that's all it is.
Okay,
It's just, again, it's semantics, but for accounting purposes, that's what we do.
So
Okay,
that's
the rest of the,
that's
go
why
ahead,
they
Jane.
count then the special purposes. What was it called? Special purpose fund that was supposedly defunct
No,
before.
the board has the right, when they're doing the operating budget, to reserve an amount as part of the appropriation to a reserve for future appropriation. That's another line. There is a line item in your fund that speaks to reserve for special purpose, because when that first was transferred into that, there was an intent to use some of those funds for a special purpose. But again, that purpose can change over a period of time, and we can be instructed, the finance department, by this board that says, we don't have any special purpose, turn that back in to our undesignated. And then it just flows into young designated, or you can leave it there and use it for another special purpose. It's all within your control. You have full control and autonomy over all those different accounts. And there's really no restriction in these other designations. The only restrictions, well, obviously the broad brush of the fund has its restriction, but the only restrictions you have is when you put the 10%, 10%, 10%, it needs to be spent on those particular purposes. So again, I think your intent is to have some flexibility and to be able to do things through the course of the year and have control over those funds. And if you just call it that you're making a reserve for a future appropriation, a reserve for appropriation, it will accomplish what you want, and your budget as you're proposing would then be adopted. We'd have no problem with the structure of that.
Do we need to go back and change our motion to
Yes.
that? And
Yep.
And the other piece is that, can you please provide us with all counts, active or not active, that you carry in Munis? I've never seen that full listing other than randomly, because I like to use account numbers being a project manager.
Every month, Laurie provides a detailed listing. We've sat with the board. So what happens is One group will say they like it this way, another want the accounts. And so we're willing to do whatever you want.
I'm just requesting, oh, it's simple. I don't need an explanation. I'm just
Well,
requesting
actually, I
the
could.
list.
I'm not-
Provide
I'm
the
not
list,
directing-
please.
Tom,
Please
I'm not
provide the
directing,
list.
I'm not directing my answer to you. I'm talking to the chair.
Okay,
I'm the
go
vice
ahead,
chair.
Tony.
So Gina, however you'd like us to do that, if you reach out to Laurie, you know she's very accommodating. So please,
I will.
and we'll
Right,
give you
we can
whatever
talk
you
about-
need, as we always do. Thank you.
Right. Laurie is very accommodating. Cal,
So-
we can work on that, on what we want, and I can request it of Laurie. How does that sound?
So I need to make them, we need to move to amend that previously approved motion,
Correct.
designate the correct account. Tony, what is the account and why number?
It's a reserve for appropriation. You do not need a number. The motion will be accepted. Does not require an account number. It's a fund balance. Does not require an account number.
So is there a
Okay,
second,
so-
so we can move on?
Okay, second from someone?
Second, Steve Rogan.
Okay, further discussion, basically the motion is just to change the account that we put it in before.
Does that also,
Okay, hearing,
does it also change it to the 10% rate?
we already changed that.
Okay.
We changed that in the original
No.
motion earlier.
Okay.
Who
Yeah.
said no?
Sure.
The excess.
Okay. Ready for a roll call, Josh? To change the fund?
Yes. Gina,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Carlton,
Yes?
Harry,
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Gina.
Yeah, thanks, Tony.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome, guys.
Yep, feel
Be
free
safe.
to stay on for the rest of the meeting.
He's gone.
He's gone. Okay, good.
Thank you, everybody.
Liaison, and
I'm taking
Good night,
off too.
Michael. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thanks.
you're leaving us too?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
He wants to go
thank
to
you for
bed.
your-
He wants to go to sleep.
I want to have supper. I haven't had supper yet. I'm gonna start eating potato chips soon. I'll shut off the volume for the crunching. Okay.
I have the way to
Liaison-
deliver.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kind of put the next thing, liaison and project process update. Liaison updates first from your respective committees. We had talked about it the last meeting. If you talk to the committees you're representing, if they have anything coming up, they can, in the foreseeable future, using CPA funds.
Gina, I think
I
this
know
is
for,
about the CPC liaison and process update.
oh,
not-
this is the, okay, this is the Jennifer part. Got it. Okay, sorry about that. Yep, okay, I just mixed that up, sorry. Okay, Jennifer Burke. Jennifer, are you still here?
I am, but
She was. Okay,
but I didn't think we were talking about that tonight. I was prepared to talk about other things tonight. You had
no, we're actually, no, you're fine, you're correct.
okay.
You look like you're out, you look like you're out in the sun.
Oh
too.
no, it's just the lighting in here.
Oh, okay. Jennifer, for those of you that don't know Jennifer Burke, she's the economic and I always have to look this up on your title. Economic
Economic
and
development.
yes, I always want to put economic and community. I want to reverse those two. Jennifer is the director for that. She's also the town liaison for the CPC. Unfortunately, we don't have Jennifer at a lot of meetings because she also does the zoning board of appeals, which seems to meet on the same night. So what we're looking for, Jennifer, is if we have something that, obviously we'd like your presence all the time, but I understand that, you know, the conflict. Our next thing on the agenda is talking about a different night, but what we would like is if there's like a meeting, we know we need the town input. We need your input on it. I like the calls now that I participate in, but if there's something that we need your thoughts or your opinion, if we could even get like a written something ahead of time, or if there's somebody else in your office that you could maybe just have come, and it wouldn't be every month, it's just as, you know, as we feel we need it, if that's possible.
Yeah, yeah, we can work on that. That's part of, I think you and Anna and I had discussed, you know, a process for the CPC, and you know, I'm still working on finalizing that, so we can certainly wrap that into that.
Okay, great. And the part about the process update is just to update that we're working on it. So that's the update. Where we had talked about it at that last meeting. So it's an update just to say we're in the process of updating. We didn't expect you to have it for tonight. So we knew that. So for the CPC members, we had talked the last couple of meetings about a process update, just to learn the whole, again, this is my Italian, if you see the hands going. The whole process from once we recommend or don't recommend, I guess recommend to the town council for approval, what happens after that point? Does it, like we know it goes to the town council, but who does the grant agreement? Who does, you know, who approves the payment of the bills? That's what we're working on with Jennifer. So, and we're in the process of working on that. So hopefully by the next meeting.
Can I just ask a quick question for Jennifer?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think we've never met before, but yeah, I'm assuming you're in the accounting department, or am I getting that
No,
right?
I'm the director of community and economic development. So I work in downstairs in community economic development with planning, zoning, conservation, ZBA. That's where I work.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So you just do CPA, like that's a small part of what you do.
Yep.
Okay. Got it.
Right.
Okay, cool. Just want to clarify that.
Okay, good. Any other discussion on the liaison process update that we're updating? Okay, moving on to the next alternate meeting date or time. I know we've talked about this before, a different night of the week. I know Josh has commitments on for other committees for a couple nights too. The planning board they meet twice a month. So, and they're on Wednesdays, but they alternate with us. So do we want to stick with the fourth Wednesday of the month for time? I know once fall starts up, Tuesdays are out for me. I think, Josh, what nights did you have? You have other meetings, right?
Yeah, Wednesdays are probably the only free day I have now.
Okay. My opinion, I don't want to lose Josh. He's like my right-hand person.
Wednesdays work great for me. I mean, that's been really perfect for me.
Okay.
Wednesdays are fine for me as well.
Okay, good. Harry? Do we still have Harry?
Oh yeah, I see him. I see his big picture.
Yeah,
right there.
I see. Yeah, he's there.
Yeah, Wednesdays is good.
Okay.
Wednesdays are good for me, but I really hope, because Jennifer has so many commitments during the week, you know, if there's any way, I think you said it, if there's even a written comment or something about their thinking is, if she can't attend, that would be wonderful.
Right, right. Yeah, we'll work on that with her as part of the process too. As Anna, Jennifer and I are working on the process. Okay, so that's good. We'll stick to Wednesday. How about, is 6 o'clock good? I know we've moved it up to 6 o'clock because we've just had a lot on the agenda. Do we want to stick with the 6 o'clock? Does that work for folks?
6 o'clock works for me. Yeah.
Okay, me too. Okay, sounds good. So we're going to stick with the fourth Wednesday of the month at 6 o'clock. Perfect. Okay, next thing, which is what I started before, the representative update for your respective committees. Park and Rec, there are things that we need done. Charlie Simons, who's the director of all the facilities and the golf course, he has a number of things that need to be done, but he's also putting them through capital planning. So before Park and Rec can make a decision on if we're going to submit an application to CPC, we need to wait to see what's going through capital projects first. So that's my update for Parks and Rec. If anybody has an update from their committees that might be looking for CPC funds.
Gina, just a quick question on that. When is that going to be found out for the capital projects? When is that going to be determined?
Jennifer, can you answer that better not better, just for, with that's part of the budget, upcoming budget, correct?
So you're talking about the capital plan?
Right.
Yeah, that's part of the upcoming budget. But I can tell you, I believe that as part of the town manager's budget, the only items in the capital plan are things that are deemed necessary. We've removed everything discretionary. Like, it's a very reduced capital plan this year because of the impacts of COVID-19. We're not sure how that will impact the budget going forward. Mm-hmm. So in order to, preserve as much of the stabilization fund as possible, the capital plan looks very different than one would have thought it would have looked before COVID-19 hit us. So there aren't going to be as many projects as we thought.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How much of a decrease is that, if you could put a percentage on from what the projections and then what's going to go through? Is it like 50% cut or something?
Oh, it's a lot more than that. I don't know it off the top of my head, to be honest with you. The initial capital plan this year, I think, was something like over $2 million. And I think the submittal was for somewhere in the $500,000 to $700,000 range.
Okay.
So.
Got it.
I think. I'm not looking at those numbers.
Jennifer, if something's not on the capital plan, it's still eligible. It's correct.
Oh, yeah, that just means that it's not being funded by a capital stabilization fund, and it's not being paid for this year. It could be funded in another fiscal year, or it could be funded by a grant later on. There are other ways to get the project funded. It's not something we have either the free cash for, or it can be funded through capital stabilization at the moment.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Jennifer. Any other committee representative updates?
I just wanted to.
Steve.
No, I was just going to say that it's partial historical, but somewhat cultural council, being the town hall feasibility study. There's currently a survey that people are taking online on Facebook, requesting like what people are looking for the town hall, and I think right now that's up to about like 250 respond. I think it just that's something that I mentioned it before, but we might want to keep looking looking at for potential CPC funding in the future.
Okay, good.
Oh, that's great news. Nice.
Yep, actually, I have to do that survey. And there's also a, Calton, what's the survey that your group has out there too? Calton.
The Community Preservation Committee?
No,
That's us, sorry. The Master Committee?
It's not open space.
Nope, so the Comprehensive Master Plan Committee has a survey, but that actually ends on Sunday is the last day for that survey. That's been out for a while. But
Okay.
that survey's out as well.
Okay, good, thank you.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, nope, that's fine. I couldn't remember what it was. I know I did it, but I couldn't remember what it was.
Yeah, that helped. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Okay, other committee updates? Thank you, Steve. Then others. Okay, next is the, for old business. If, I know we have the Alden House first. If we can take, or Alden House should be quick. We'll just do them in order. Anna, you had our.
Yeah, I can give an update. We're meeting with Historic New England tomorrow. Tomorrow, and also with David Moore and the family to talk about the Historic New England holding a preservation restriction or their interest in holding a restriction on the property. So we're moving along with that, but that's the update that we currently have. And then Jen prepared a memo on the Alden House for both the preservation and conservation restriction for the two parcels. Jen, did you want to mention anything from the memo?
Did everybody get it? I think we sent it around earlier today.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I got it.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, if everything goes forward, if the family decides that they want to impose a preservation and a conservation restriction on their own property, they could either donate that and get, a variety of tax breaks for that as a charitable donation, or they could ask for funding for it, and you'd probably get an application that you could consider whether or not to fund it. My guess is they'd put a deal together with a couple of entities, potentially Historic New England, and maybe, I don't think anyone's even approached Wildlands Trust, but another land trust like them or them would potentially be interested if someone approached them. So so there's nothing really for you to consider right now, but we did start to put the wheels in motion. And David Moore, I think, is probably interested in helping the family figure this out as well. So at some point you may or may not get an application, but that's kind of the nature of what it would likely be if you were to get one at some point in the future.
Wildlands Trust has been informed.
Okay.
Okay, are they interested, Harry, in?
Yes, they are.
Doing anything? They are. Oh, good. Okay, that's very
Thank you,
good.
Jennifer. And Anna, thank you for putting that together. It's very helpful.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes, it explains a lot for us. Very good. Thank you. Okay, that's good. Okay, anything else on the Alden House? Anyone? Okay, hearing none. Jennifer Burke, just an update on the Housing Trust, please.
No real update. It's dormant at the moment. There's no funding mechanism unless we start doing some routine transfers from CPC, or we adopt inclusionary zoning, or we have some developer payments for affordable housing. So at the moment, there is no funding mechanism, so the trust is dormant.
Okay, good, thank you. Any questions or comments for Jennifer's update?
I just have a question. Would the trust consider applying for CPA funds?
I don't know. I'd have to ask them. I mean,
That's probably the most common funding source of housing trusts.
yeah, I mean, I don't see why not, but
Yeah, most of the time they just apply for it as an application
Yeah.
that comes in each year.
Yeah, just like a
Okay.
regular application. I'm sure it's just the same thing.
Jennifer, do you know how many active members are currently, so I know Michael Dutton is supposed to be the chair. I don't know how many members are appointed? Do you know?
it's either 2 or 3. I'm not sure if it's 2 or 3, but it's either 2 or 3 active members at the moment.
Okay, and how many people should it be?
I don't have that answer, Gene. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. Probably the housing trust is the thing I'm least knowledgeable on this. But so if you did put in, the town did put in a CPA application to make the housing trust endowment to fund it, would that just, I'm sure it just wouldn't be
It's
a random.
5 members. I just looked it up. It's 5 members.
Okay, so 5 and there's 2 to 3.
So
Okay.
Jennifer, I know Michael at one meeting somewhere along the line in the last month or 6 weeks has said something that you guys might be looking at some kind of rental assistance in this period of COVID. Is there any progress or anything that we should be given heads up on?
At the moment, no. I'm putting together sort of program guidelines and possibility of a program. He's thinking about what we would look for funding. We have not been made aware of any need for that in Bridgewater. So we don't want to sort of jump the gun if it's not a need for it. But we're putting sort of all of our ducks in a row in case we realize that there is a need for it. So we're ready to act as soon as we can. That's sort of where that stands at the moment.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, other questions on the housing trust? Okay. I think that Jen Golson, I think that's a good suggestion for the CPA application. And it's something for the housing trust to think about. Okay, moving on, new business. The Bastow House, I had forwarded, Mr. Walsh, are you still here?
Yes.
Okay. James Walsh had written to me about the Bastow House, and I sent it out to the rest of you. I responded to him that, you know, thanking him for his interest in preservation. But until the owners of the property come to us that our hands are tied, not hands are tied, we can't even really address it, because the owners have to be the ones to, if they were looking for CPA funding. And also the fact that when he had written, he mentioned the Keith Homestead, that he would like to see something done with the Bastow House. Jennifer Burke, just for your info, the Bastow House is on Pleasant Street, almost opposite the end of Union Street. It's an older house, very historic house. But I also mentioned the maintenance issue, that CPA funds cannot be used for maintenance, and the town doesn't have the funds to maintain a historic residence and all that. But I just wanted to put it on the agenda where we have the correspondence for it. If anybody has any discussion on it.
Yeah, Chief,
But again,
do you mind if I say a few words about how the Keith Homestead deal came together?
Yep, go right ahead.
And I don't know, James, if this is a helpful sort of background for how the deal came together that could be, you know, some lessons taken for the Barstow House. But essentially, townspeople, I don't remember who it was, to be honest, were concerned because it was going to be potentially demolished. It was purchased by a developer and they had a subdivision that had been approved and they were trying to basically sell it with the approved subdivision plan, and the house would have been torn down. And so the town got involved, and I was involved with it at that time as well, under the CPC's direction. And we found a few partners, somebody, Historic New England, who cared about the house and the historic resource nature of the property. And then the Department of Fish and Game, the state, cared about the open space. And they ended up negotiating with the property owner, who wasn't necessarily conservation minded. He wasn't opposed to conservation. He just basically wanted fair market value for the property. So he worked out a purchase and sale agreement with, and I don't remember exactly who signed it, but I believe it was with a town entity, had to approve. Harry, jump in. I know that you were involved back then too, if I'm getting any of the details wrong. But once the purchase and sale was signed and there was an agreement for the property to buy the property, then the town put in an application. I think it was probably put in jointly with Fish and Game to purchase the property and put a conservation restriction as well as a preservation restriction on. And then the idea was, actually it was undecided at the time of the purchase what to do with the property. After the town purchased the property, then the town went through a community engagement process to try to figure out what to do with it. Should it be used as a house museum? Should it be, kept for some other use, kept as town property, or should it be sold? And the town ended up deciding that they couldn't really take care of it. They couldn't commit to taking care of another property. And so they opted to sell it, but to protect it with Historic New England holding a preservation restriction that protected the house and the barn, I think it was, and the surrounding land that was immediately adjacent to the house. And then the rest of the land is protected with the conservation restriction that I believe this, Harry, tell me if I'm wrong. I think the state owns the land and the town holds the CR, or is it the other way around? I can't remember the details of the conservation piece.
Let's see. The restrictions to the conservation, the state holds
Okay.
the land.
Yeah. So the town holds the restriction.
Right.
The state owns the conservation land. Yeah. So that's how that deal came together. And at some point, an application was put before the CPC for consideration, but a deal was already struck with the property owner. So you need to have a willing property owner and an entity who's willing to, negotiate on behalf of either the town. It's possible the Historic Commission could be involved. I know they're already involved in the Alden House project. So James, I don't know if that's helpful background to sort of help get a deal going on that.
Hi, Jennifer. Yeah, this is James, and thank you and Gina and the committee for hearing this. That's definitely very, very helpful. I know I'd seen like the really wonderful results out of that, but didn't really have an idea of, all the different factors that go into and steps that go into it. I know the property is all for sale now for an industrial site. So would it be possible, maybe if I reached out to you, do you have a contact maybe at Historic New England or someone I might be able to?
Yeah, I do. And, with the CPC's permission, I'd be happy to talk to you offline and connect you with my contact at Historic New England. Is, we can certainly talk I work for the CPC, so I just want them to tell me that that's okay to do.
Mm-hmm. Carlton, any?
I know the owners of that property, and I think you use the word industrial, but I don't think it's an industrial that they want to put in there. I believe that they would like that land to be used for a, what's the term? housing for people that, assisted living house, thank you. And I think there's been a lot of discussions on that already, but I'm not privy to those discussions. So all I can say is I've heard. But I think the owners are very far along in terms of what they're trying to do with that property. And I certainly don't want anybody to think it's an industrial piece. And assisted living properties, I will say, housing is really a big piece that's happening in the country and in Massachusetts right now. It's an important housing. It's also creates revenue that isn't necessarily going to need school and that kind of thing. So from that perspective, I'm not, Jennifer may be able to talk more about what's going on, but I don't want to, all I'm going to say is I know there's activity in that area for assisted living, not an industrial.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the comment. I was just going off of the sign on the front. But yeah, no, I agree. There's definitely a need for housing stock. I just would have hoped maybe there was a way to broker a deal where, you know, this historic home that's on just one kind of small portion of that lot is somehow protected or preserved. But thank you for the clarification on that.
That could be, and I also understand that the house is not in the best of shape. Let me put it that way.
And James, I'd also like to invite you to the next historical commission meeting. If we're be more than happy to have you over there to discuss the building and any of your thoughts, because I don't know if I follow James's website, Bridgewater Archive. It's
Wonderful site.
Yep. So he's been a good asset recently for some information. But if you want to talk more with the historical commission, I'll give you the information on our next meeting.
Oh, thanks, Steve. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Now, from what I understand from looking at the maps that James had sent, there's a sizable amount of property with no building on it. Is that something Carlton might, for the assisted living that you've heard they're looking at, would they tear down the house and build something else, or would they just modify the house to be assisted living?
I don't have that level of understanding.
Okay. And even at that, and I can't remember how big the non piece of property with no building on it, how big that is, if that's something that, Historic New England or somebody, or wildlife, I'm not sure. I think it goes back to, no, I'm thinking another piece of property. But, maybe just for the open space part, it might be something that, to talk to the other groups. And I, obviously I don't know what their owners are thinking, as I said, tear down or fix up that, modify that house. But it might be worth possible, for someone to, not CPC, but James, or if he reached out to for Historic New England for just the property itself,
Yeah.
Without a house.
Would the CPC have any objection if I spoke with James on the phone, just to give him some contacts at Historic New England and talk through the background of the Keith Homestead project?
Okay, I have no problem. Anybody else?
I just think you ought to speak to the owners first.
Well, I can't do that, but I just want to give James some background on how
Background's fine. Background's
how to
fine.
put a deal together. That's all.
You're not representing the owner, or you're just fact finding for us. That's fine.
Yep.
Right. She's just passing on just background info.
Yep.
Right. She's not advising him on what to do for this. Okay. Anybody else for and not for? Jennifer passing on info. Okay, I guess it's a go.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, committee, as well.
Okay.
Thanks for being patient.
Oh,
Yes,
my
and
pleasure.
thank you for your Bridgewater archive site. As I mentioned to you, I really like that.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a lot of downtime at home, so I'm glad I could share something people enjoy.
That's good. Thank you.
Give my Facebook page a run for its money.
Yeah, yeah. Between the two of you, I love looking at those pages. As I told James, I've lived in town all my life, and I've learned stuff from his. And I mentioned something to my brother the other day, and he's like, "You didn't know that?" And I'm like, "No, sorry." Okay.
James, I just had a quick question for you too. Before you go, is this website? Is this like? This is really. I don't know what developer you use for your website, but is this your own funding to do this?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, it's my own funding. I work in technology, so it's kind of a side hobby. But it's, you know, Wix is just kind of the base of it. So
Oh, Wix. Okay, Wix. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
Are
very
you Rod's nephew?
I am, yes. I'm Rod Walsh's nephew.
Okay, I was going to ask you what part of, it didn't hit me with the last name. I was going to ask you what part of Crescent Street. But if you're down, are you down in the Homestead?
Yes, right over on Crescent and Fremont. So that's part of the reason it means a lot too. Our family got our land from Captain Barstow, so it's a kind of a nice symbolical history there too.
Okay, is Linda your mom?
Yeah, she is.
Oh, okay. I think I knew her way back when. Oh, that's interesting. And your grandfather was my mother's teacher in high school at Bridgewater, the Bridgewater Academy. She used to talk about Cap Walsh all the time.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, that's great. I never connected the name at all. So that's
thank you.
good.
Hey,
Yep.
Steve, isn't there an opening on the Historical Commission?
There is.
There's a place to put your time.
Thank you. No, consider it. Thank you so much. And I'll share that with my mother. She'll be really happy to hear that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and actually, just quickly, she'll remember my sister-in-law's family, the Barneys on Pleasant Street. She'd remember them well. I know Roddy does too. But,
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to last but not least, our update from Jennifer Burke on the McElwain School. Like, what's happening with that?
So they've done some minor repairs inside of the building to, you know, sort of maintain it and protect the building itself. They have received their comprehensive permit from the ZBA last May, so a year ago. They have received, so I think, let me look at my notes. About 500,000 in state historic credits, and they submitted again for another round in April, and they said they'll continue to submit until it reaches its cap. They have released their architect and engineer to create their advanced construction drawings, and they have applied for their funding through DHCD in February of this past year. They're hoping to hear back in the summer. Once they do that, they'll be ready to finalize the deal with the town, and they hope to close, if all goes well, early 2021. They also have made the decision to make the new building behind the McElwain a passive house. And if you don't know what that is, it's relative to energy efficiency. It's a new certification, and they feel that would benefit the property, and DHCD looks highly upon that. So that's sort of the update. It's sort of a waiting game with them right now until all of their funding is in place.
Jennifer, I'm sorry.
Can you explain more what a passive building is?
What? I'm sorry?
Can you explain more what a passive building is?
I don't know the details of it. I know that it's an energy, I can Google it. It's an energy efficiency related certification. I think it's a relatively new certification.
Okay, but it's still going to be the same design.
Oh, yeah, that's not changing. It has to do with like the windows and the heating system.
The way it traps heat
Okay.
and like the energy efficiency. It's like a LEED certification for a building.
Yeah, it's from I want to say it's from like Sweden or something. That's where it started.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Carlton?
From an energy perspective, like to learn more about that passive housing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll have to look it up. Thank you.
Yeah, that was interesting. Okay, thank you, Anna. Anna just gave us info in chat on the passive housing. Thank you. Okay, good for thank you, Jennifer, for the update. Any questions or comments on the school? I'm dying to see once it's done how they change it, because that's where I went to elementary school. And I remember the bathrooms downstairs with the big sinks.
So they hope to break ground sometime in the spring of 2021?
I think that's the goal if all the funding gets into place this year, yes.
And they just have one thing left for funding to meet?
So yeah, their major funding piece is DHCD, yes. And once that's in place, I mean, obviously the more historic tax credits, the better. So,
yeah.
But the funding piece from DHCD is key, and they should hear from them this summer.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Oh.
Yep. Other questions or comments, discussion? Okay, hearing that, any new business, any other new business?
Oh, one thing, we didn't get a chance to talk with, Anna had sent a memo out.
Oh, that's right.
And I don't want to get into it tonight. I'd like to make sure we can focus on that at next meeting, because I think it's really relevant to some of our discussions about what we can do, what we may want to focus on for next year besides just receiving applications. So if you don't mind, Anna, where are you? I'm looking for you. We'll take top item next meeting.
That makes sense. And I also think with Jennifer's process piece, I think those two pieces will dovetail nicely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you, Carlton, for that. I had it on top, and when I flipped over my agenda, I covered it. So thank you so much for that. And
you're welcome.
Thank you for preparing it. I thought it was very, very complete, very thorough.
Gives me something to do the next month.
Right. We'll put it on for next month. I want to thank. We have no more regular business, and we're going to be done in less than a 4-hour meeting. I want to thank Jennifer Burke, Jen Golson, Anna, James, all of the guests that we had tonight for their participation.
Yes, thank you.
Yep, the CPC members, I think everything was a great discussion. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Gina. You're the best.
Oh, I try. You guys keep me in line.
So are you going to follow Robert's Rules of Order and declare the meeting over?
I am declaring the meeting over, and I'm going to find something for supper.
Thank you.
So I am declaring the